weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil dich ein in die Arbeit einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil dich ein in die Arbeiter einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil dich ein in die Arbeiter einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome to Socialism Saturday. Socialism Saturday is where we watch the real far left, the real socialists that are pushing the cultural revolution in the United States right now. If you want to know where critical race theory in schools comes from, it comes from these people. If you want to know where gender ideology comes from, it comes from these people. If you want to know where attacks on parental rights comes from, it comes from these people. If you want to know where calls to defund the police come from, it comes from these people. If you want to know why college students are protesting in favor of Hamas on college campuses, it comes from these people. Every single crazy thing that you see going on in the United States comes from the furthest of the far left radical revolutionary socialist activists. And that's why we take a couple hours out of our day every single week to make sure that we are watching the real left. These are not CNN socialists. These are not AOC. These are not Bernie Sanders. These are not champagne socialists like Vosh. These aren't even Democratic Socialists of America. I know the right think that the DSA are the most leftist socialists in the country, but no. The real socialist groups don't even allow their members to be part of the DSA because they consider the DSA to be way too close to capitalism to even remotely be considered socialist. This is the most dystopian shit you are going to see all week long, and that's why we do Socialism Saturday. Now, guys, we're going to be watching a throwback today because I was looking through the website or the YouTube channel of a socialist book publisher or not a socialist book publisher, a socialist bookstore rather, excuse me, because did you guys know, fun fact, one of the ways that socialists spread their message to each other and recruit more followers is there are socialist bookstores, like dedicated socialist bookstores in every major city in the United States. They sell socialist books. They hold classes about socialist books. They bring authors to teach people about socialism. They broadcast information about socialist books on the internet. And one of those socialist bookstores is Hausman's bookstore. And I'm not sure where they are exactly, probably in like Seattle or something like that. Let's just take a look real quick, see if we can suss out where they are from. Let's see. A nonprofit, worker-run, living wage-paying, solar-powered, Radical, oh, in London. These are in London. This isn't even the United States. Radical booksellers. Anytime you see the term radical, except if you're talking to like a surfer or a Ninja Turtle or something like that, or a pizza delivery man or something like that, if you see the word radical, that means socialist, guys. That's what that means. Yes, Autumn, this is in your neck of the woods. You can go visit them in person. So they have on their channel a whole metric ton of talks about socialist books and classes about socialist books. And I don't think we've watched their content before. So I was perusing their stuff today to kind of check them out. And I found this video from 2 years ago. Let's get an exact date on this. April 10th, 2021. So like over 2.5 years ago. So this was right after the George Floyd uprising, which socialists call the riots of 2020, the George Floyd uprising or the George Floyd rebellion. So this was filmed like in early 2021. So we have to make sure we understand the time frame of this. And I couldn't resist going back and watching this one because the title is just too compelling. It's too compelling. What white people can do next. From allyship to coalition. Now, just the title alone screams socialist to me. Let me translate the title for those of you who have not yet learned how to speak socialist. When socialists are talking about whiteness, white people, white supremacy, racism, anti-racism, they're never talking about skin color. Never, ever, ever. And I know they try to confuse you. I know that it really does seem like they're talking about skin color, but they are never talking about skin color. They are always and perpetually talking about capitalism. Because for socialists, they believe that capitalism created slavery because slaves were literally private property. Socialists believe the definition of capitalism is private property ownership. Whether or not that's true is not our business. That's not what we're concerned with. We're only concerned with what they believe. We're going to talk more about that in a second. Socialists believe that capitalism created slavery because it was private property ownership. Slavery created systemic racism. And the only way to overcome systemic racism in the United States, which is what the riots of 2020 were all about, is to implement this system called equity. Equity means that everyone has the same access to resources. It means that no one is rich. It means that no one is poor. It means that everything is public. Everything is part of the collective. In other words, equity means Marxism. So when you see socialists talk about what white people can do next, what they're talking about is not people with white skin. What they're talking about is the capitalist class, the bourgeois, the business owners, the private property owners, the people who are perpetuating systemic racism in the country. You can't exactly, John. They believe that you cannot end racism, which again, they describe on the system level. That's what systemic racism is. These people believe that you cannot end racism without ending capitalism because capitalism is the cause of racism in the United States. So that's what that means. Now let's look at from ally to coalition. The term ally, I believe, is a gateway drug to the term comrade. They can't go out, socialists can't go out and say, we want everyone to be comrades, because if they use the term comrade, they sound like communists and they don't want you to know that's what they're like ushering you into. And so what socialists did was they changed the term because socialists fight the battle with the dialectic. They fight the battle with language. Socialists may have the same vocabulary as us, but they have completely different definitions. They have a completely different dictionary. This is why it's really important for us to learn how to speak socialist so that we can start picking up on what their definitions are. When it comes to ally means comrade. It's like entry level comrade. What they really want is for you to become a full-fledged comrade, but they'll ease you into the process by calling you an ally first. It's like when my husband was growing up in Ukraine when it was part of the USSR. When he was in school, he wasn't a comrade yet. He wasn't a member of the party. He was a pioneer. Pioneer was the gateway to being a comrade. Pioneer was like the training grounds for being a comrade. In the United States, with the social justice left, ally is the training grounds for being a comrade. So even with just that, we haven't even looked at the definition yet. We already know that this is going to be a banner day. Let's read the description. When it comes to racial justice, how do we transform demonstrations of support into real and meaningful change? The Black Feminist Bookshop. I fucking love Black feminists. I love Black feminists. Black feminists are the best. Black feminists hold nothing back. They say the quiet part out loud over and over and over again. They're great. What white people can do next, from allyship to coalition, is a manifesto for meaningful and lasting change, born from the need to talk about racial injustice in a new way. It is a nuanced examination of, wait for it. The book is a nuanced examination of race, class, and capitalism. The book, What White People Can Do Next, literally is described as being a nuanced conversation about race, class, and capitalism. From years of academic study and lived experience, as well as personal reflection. Emma will be in conversation with climate justice and anti-racist activist Michaela. They will discuss some of the key aspects of what white people can do next, the concept of, check this out. The concept of race in quotes. They put race in quotes. Why did they put race in quotes? Because it has nothing to do with your skin color. The concept of race is one of the most powerful, seductive, and enduring myths of our time, created to cause division. If these people thought that race was about skin color, then why would they be calling it one of the most enduring myths of our time and created to cause division? Because they believe that race was invented by capitalism. It was invented to keep white people who owned slaves in positions of power and black people who were considered to be private property in positions of oppression. That's why they say that capitalism invented race. Capitalism is the root cause of all of this. The origins of quote unquote whiteness, so they're going to explain that, and why the myth of a codified white race and white supremacy was created in the first place. Here's what they're going to say. I'm going to give you a preview. Whiteness was created when the first slaves were brought to America in 1619, even though that's not when the first slaves were brought to America. But again, the truth is less meaningful here than what these people believe. And the reason that whiteness was created when the first slaves were brought to America is that white people who were the private property owners, the capitalists, the bourgeois, the owners of the power structure, made black people private property, and they created a system which today is called systemic racism in order to keep the private property owners at the top of the power structure and the oppressed property, who were the slaves, at the bottom of the power structure. That's what they're going to say. Let's see. What white people can do next moves the conversation from a well-intentioned yet often misinformed world of Instagram posts and online outrage and asks not for allyship or privilege passing, but a coalition of common goals. So guys, that is what we're going to be watching for Socialism Saturday tonight. Please make sure you have mounted the like button for me. Thank you to everyone watching on YouTube. Thank you to everyone watching on Rumble and on X. I appreciate it. Please make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're watching on. Just a couple orders of business before we get started. Number one order of business. If you are new to Socialism Saturday, please let us know in the chat that you're new. No harm, no foul. This can be a little bit intimidating. I just like to know when we have new people watching, because we will gently guide you into the crazy world that is dystopian socialism. So let us know if you are new in the chat. While you guys are doing that, I do just want to make you aware of a couple things. Number one, in my Unwoke art merchandise store, which you can find at unwokeart.com, link in the description below, I am doing a daily sale where for 24 hours you get 25% off a specific design. And today we're doing a really appropriate design, because today we're doing the Orwell collection. There are actually two designs in this one. I basically reimagined movie posters for 1984 and for Animal Farm, and you can get everything with this design on it for 25% off for today only. You can actually get them in poster form. Here is what the 1984 movie poster looks like, and here is what the Animal Farm movie poster looks like. And they're super cool, man. I'm really proud of this one. My husband loves this one. My husband grew up in the USSR. He's like, you made the pig look just like a general. This is effing great. Don't tell my husband. I'm gonna get him one of these t-shirts for Christmas, okay? Because he really loves this design. But you can get both of these today for 25% off in the Unwoke Art store. I'm doing a new deal every single day. So a new design is going to be on sale every day. And you know what's going to be on sale tomorrow, or at midnight tonight, rather? We're doing All Tears Are Tasty. All Tears Are Tasty, the classic All Tears Are Tasty tumbler, which you can only get in my Unwoke art store. We don't just drink leftist tears on this channel. We drink all tears. In fact, oftentimes I'm drinking more tears by manifested by the conservative right than I am by the woke left. So you can get the classic All Tears Are Tasty tumbler tomorrow in the store for 25% off. I'm going to put it on a whole bunch of new products, and that's coming up. But you only have until midnight tonight to get your 25% off on the Orwell collection with either the 1984 poster or the Animal Farm poster. So maybe slide into the store while we're watching the show tonight. It'll be a great thing to do. I did, Autumn. I did. You're welcome. I also want to let people know, please make sure you are subscribed to my Substack, which is Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com. There it is. I don't know why it was so big. My Substack is my main content hub on the internet. You can subscribe for free, but this is going to be a really good week for you to become a paid subscriber, guys. If you have been thinking about becoming a paid subscriber, this is the week to do it. You want to know why? Because this week we are conducting our biggest woke infiltration ever. We are going inside a live multi-day woke teacher training, and I'm streaming it on the internet, and I'm going to show you exactly what your kids' teachers are learning. And let me just say, without telling you what it is, because we can't give it away. If we give it away, they might try to disrupt our plans. They might figure out who we are because we're signed up under fake names and stuff like that. And so we don't want to give it away, but let me just tell you, it's very, very, very sexy. You're going to learn very sexy things about what your kids are learning in middle school. You're going to learn very sexy things about what your kids are going to learn in elementary school. You're going to learn very sexy things about what your autistic kids are going to learn. You're going to learn very sexy things about what you can teach children 0 through 6. You're going to have a very sexy conversation about should parental rights even exist in education. There's going to be all sorts of sexiness in this infiltration, and we're going to show you what's happening, and we're going to bring it to you live. And the only way to get access to that is by becoming a supporter on my Substack. You can also become a supporter on my locals, Patreon, Twitter, or YouTube. Paid subscribers on all those platforms are going to get access to it. But if you had to choose one, I would definitely prefer my Substack. $8 a month, $80 for the year. And you will not only get access to the only multi-day infiltration that we have ever done, or at least done this year. We may do more of them after this. Maybe not. Maybe not. Who knows? You will also get access to all of my spy streams and a bunch of supporter perks, to include 2 Zoom calls every single week with me and my awesome community, to include movie night in our supporter Discord. Tomorrow in the supporter Discord for movie night, I'm being forced to watch Monty Python. I'm not happy about this, but I don't pick the movies for movie night except in the month of April, which is my month of narcissism. I'm not happy about being forced to watch Monty Python, but I don't make the rules. Jennifer makes the rules on movie night. And tomorrow for movie night, we are watching Life of Brian. It's gonna be fine. But you can get access to the supporter Discord. Yeah, bot, I would say there's a good chance I'm gonna be high for that. Yeah, I would say there's a really good chance. So that's what you can get access to, guys. If it's not enough that I'm going to bring you next week my biggest conference infiltration ever, then come and stay for movie night. Movie nights are fun. We do trivia. We talk about the movie. We listen to music related to the movie. It's a great group of people. And I will be sending out information about how to join my Discord tomorrow in the Unwoke Roundup email. This will also have your Zoom links for the Zoom calls that we do every single week. And of course, I can't do the work I'm doing without you. And I really do appreciate it. Let's see. Hang on. Autumn said something I wanted to react to. Yes, Autumn, I do AI art and I don't care how you think about it. Capitalism is awesome. If you don't like it, then go make better art and outcompete me, okay? All right, let's see. Do I have anything else before we get started? I don't think I do, except that I want to go over the Socialism Saturday guide. We have some ground rules for Socialism Saturday. The reason that we have ground rules for Socialism Saturday is I've done this enough where I know I just need to walk people through some guidelines. Now, the reason that we do Socialism Saturday is because socialists speak in a coded language, okay? They may use the same vocabulary as us. They do not use the same dictionary. The purpose of this exercise is not to debunk them. I'm going to ask everyone to refrain from debunking the socialists. The reason is if we spent all of our time debunking the socialists, that we wouldn't get anything else accomplished. Whether or not what these people believe is true does not matter. The point of this exercise is to understand what they believe and why they believe it, because whether or not what they believe is true or accurate doesn't make a difference in terms of their behavior. When people believe something is true, they are going to act in accordance with that belief. And you debunking them doesn't really make a difference because it's not like we're talking to them. It's not like they're here. So the exercise is to understand them, to understand their thought process. You can learn to understand people and how they think without agreeing with it. Okay. So please keep the debunking to an absolute minimum. I find it to be a distraction. It takes us off course. It ends up with people getting in arguments with each other. It doesn't add any value to what we're doing. So please refrain. This is about knowing thy enemy. Exactly, Justin. Good to see you. Number 3, if you have questions, and I will take as many questions as people have that are genuine, that are asked in good faith, please ask them in the chat, especially if you're new. Again, if you're new to Socialism Saturday, welcome. We're glad you made it. Learning socialism can be an overwhelming experience, so just sit back and go with it. If you feel like you don't understand everything, it's not you, it's them, because they speak in a coded language that is deliberately meant to confuse you. But if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I will say that if you are a longer time viewer of my content, at some point, I'm going to start having higher expectations of you. Okay, so if you come and you keep asking the same question over and over and over and over and over again, and it's a question that I've explained over and over and over and over and over again, guys, I don't like repeating myself unless I absolutely have to. I'll repeat myself for new people. I will not repeat myself to people who come and ask the same question every single week. As long as you have been here and you've heard me answer these things, at some point I'm going to say, you've been here long enough to know better, try to catch up. All right. I have high expectations. This is like a class. If you keep coming to a class that's trying to teach you something and you don't learn anything, that is a waste of your time. It's a waste of my time. This is not just like a normal stream where we're shitpost and banter and stuff like that. This is entirely about learning. Okay. If you don't want to learn, you don't have to be here. Number 4, normal chat rules apply, which is don't be a dick. Do not insult me. Do not insult other people in the chat. I can do whatever the fuck I want, David, because you're in my house. If you come in my house, which you're already doing, and you whine and complain and you insult me and you're a passive-aggressive little shit, then I will tell you to cut that shit out. And if you don't cut it out, you don't have to be here. Thank you, David, for providing me with an example of what is not acceptable. If you are only here to cause problems and here to whine and complain because, you have a mean tone, you're awful, you say mean things, then get the fuck out. You are welcome to go and avail yourself of everyone else on the internet doing this. Oh, wait, I'm the only person on the internet doing this. So as long as you're in my house, you will follow my rules. You would not come into my house and insult me. You would not come into my house and whine. You would not come into my house and complain. Bye, David. Bye. You're going to get blocked now, bitch, because if you announce your departure, I block you. Go away. Listen, guys, as much as I want people to learn socialism, what I will not put up with is the whiny bullshit from the internet. You can avail yourself of every other person doing this. If you don't like my tone, you don't like my attitude. Oh, wait, I'm the only person on the internet doing this. Lastly, do not argue with me. My goal is to teach you guys as much as I know from watching thousands of hours of these people. I have watched more of these people than anyone else on the internet, with the possible exception of the people who have been watching with me for years and years and years. Okay? I know my shit when it comes to this. If I am telling you that you are not answering a question correctly, it's because you're not answering a question correctly. If you sit there and argue with me, you are going to distract everything. The point of this is to learn. If you do not want to learn, you don't need to be here. But what I will not engage with is people arguing and whining and complaining. The fact of the matter is that conservative influencers have lied to their audience so drastically that so many people come into my chat and they regurgitate conservative talking points that have no basis in reality. They're made up conservative political tribalist talking points. Now, I'm not going to blame you if you've been lied to by your influencers and you believe them, but what I will not put up with is you coming in, shilling political talking points, and then continuing to whine and complain when I tell you that's not what's going on. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm not trying to make you cry. I'm not trying to do any of those things, but what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, and that's just reality. And if you don't like it, again, you don't have to be here. So those are the rules for Socialism Saturday. I hope everyone understands them. Can I have a grade for this class? Yes, bot, you can have an A. Congratulations. All right. Part of learning is correction. That's right. You wouldn't walk into a class in school and expect that if you get the wrong answer, the teacher's going to say, oh, honey, just because you're wrong doesn't mean I'm going to tell you you're wrong. You still get an A. If you're wrong, and you should take correction. And that's just the way it goes. All right, guys. With all of that out of the way, let's get started. I got to come up with a quicker way to do that preamble, but I feel like I need to talk through it all. No, we're not doing bingo. I found bingo to be distracting, and people were paying more attention to bingo than what was actually going on. So it is what it is, guys. This is about learning. This is not about playing bingo. I also want to update the bingo card, and I haven't had a chance to do it. All right, guys, we are watching What White People Can Do next from Allyship to Coalition. Let's get this party started.
Oh, look, these numbers are really ticking up. Wow. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to this joint event between the Black Feminist Bookshop and Houseman's. We're just going to take a few more seconds as people come in to join us. Please feel free to use the chat box to say hi and let us know where you're logging in from. Oh, we've got somebody in from Canada.
Good
Welcome
sound
from
today, at
Canada
least.
and from
I like her
London.
glasses. Those are fun.
Ooh, all over. Nova Scotia, Gateshead, amazing. Luxembourg, fantastic.
Hey, I saw someone who's in Edinburgh. Yay.
In Edinburgh.
Representing.
Okay. Right. So for those of you just joining us, welcome to this joint event between the Black Feminist Bookshop and Housemans. Just to remind you that tonight, only our speakers are welcome. So are visible. So you will only see our speakers and hear our speakers. You will be able to ask questions tonight and participate in the discussion at the end, but we'll talk a bit more about that later. First of all, I'd like us to welcome our guests. So first up, we have academic, activist, broadcaster Emma Dabiri, and also activist and writer Michaela Loach. So we're here to celebrate the publication of Emma's new book, What White People Can Do Next, From Allyship to Coalition, published this month by Penguin, and it's already causing a storm. It's been described as a manifesto for meaningful and lasting change. Emma Dabiri is an Irish-Nigerian academic, activist, broadcaster, and teaching fellow in the Africa department at SOAS and visual sociology.
Dan. Dan and I may have bonded over a shared hatred for Emily Drabinski, but our relationship has been solidified over a shared enemy that is stepmom Deb Philman. I love it. Thank you for joining us, Dan. We appreciate you.
PhD researcher at Goldsmiths. Her 2019 debut, Don't Touch My Hair, published by Penguin, was an Irish Times bestseller and published to critical and commercial acclaim. The book also inspired a national conversation about race and hair and has led to changing regulations in schools and in the British Army. A regular broadcaster on the BBC, Emma presented Back in Time Brixton, Britain's Lost Masterpieces, as well as the sociological experiment, Is Love Racist? Most recently, she hosted Radio 4's critically acclaimed documentary, Journeys into Afrofuturism, and I listened to that and it was amazing. Michaela Loach is a climate justice activist, co-host of the Yikes podcast, writer and fourth-year medical student based in Edinburgh. In 2020, Forbes, Global Citizen, and BBC Women's Hour named Michaela as one of the most influential women in the UK climate movement. Her work focuses on making the climate movement more inclusive and focusing on the intersections of the climate crisis with oppressive systems such as white supremacy and migrant injustices. Her activism...
Pop quiz. What do socialists believe created climate change and why? Don't just say the word. I want why. Okay, we're advancing our knowledge here. What do socialists believe created climate change and why? Pop quiz. Yes. Bought in for the win. Bought, you really did earn that A. Socialists believe that capitalism created climate change because the profit motive of capitalism led to like overproduction and bad business decisions that impacted the environment because capitalists put profit over protecting the environment. Therefore, if we abolish capitalism, that will fix climate change. Gronzel over on Rumble says capitalism due to the profit motive. Well done, Gronzel. Capitalism because of greed. Capitalism only cares about profits. Capitalism created it because of unchecked appetite for goods. Well, Autumn the socialist even got this right. Capitalism because capitalism prioritizes maximum profit. Capitalist overproduction. The profit motive of capitalism. You guys are good. Well done. Capitalist overproduction. Capitalism excess product. Capitalism because consumerism pollutes and perpetuates the power structure. Capitalism because of the profit motives. Capitalist manufacturing. Well done. Well done, everyone who got it right.
Has been featured in the BBC, Vogue, Cosmopolitan, Elle, and Vice. She uses her Instagram platform and the Yikes podcast to communicate the need for system change, climate justice, and dismantling white supremacy. Tonight's event is organized by the Black Feminist Bookshop and Houseman's Radical Bookshop. So a bit about those two bookshops. The Black Feminist Bookshop, a radical space of literature, knowledge, and kinship. We are a collective of Black feminist writers, activists, organizers, educators, and healers working together to open an inclusive, accessible, and—
Yasmin, I was hoping you would come today. We're watching the Black Feminist, Yasmin. Yasmin likes the Black Feminist as well.
affirming bookshop for Black women, femmes, girls, and non-binary people. Through our pop-ups, events, and online, we sell feminist literature, text written by queer, LGBTQ people of color, women of color, and other historically marginalized
Listen to how much Socialist is in that
books
introduction.
written by undertold and underrepresented
Jesus
voices.
Christ.
We have a monthly reading group where Black women, femmes, and non-binary people draw on the works and legacies of Black feminist writers to generate strategies for self and collective healing and liberation. We also come together with allies to create radical social change. Follow us on Instagram at Black Feminist Bookshop and sign up to our mailing list to be kept up to date on our progress, plans, and events.
Pop quiz. When she said we have Black feminists and femmes, what did she mean? Let me ask this a different way. What is the difference between a Black feminist and a femme? Does anyone know? What is the difference between a Black feminist and a femme? Trans women are femmes. Kind of. It doesn't necessarily need to be trans, though. It doesn't need to be trans. Femmes are not necessarily cisgender. Not kind of. Keep going. Not necessarily. Yes, this has to do with queer. Feminine presenting. Exactly. Femme is a gender presentation. Yup. So how I understand femme, exactly, femme could be non-binary or trans woman, or it could be a gay man who is really, really, really feminine. You know, like a really effeminate gay man could be a femme as well. It's someone who presents overtly feminine. Could be non-binary, could be queer, could be a feminine man. All of those things could be femme. So doesn't necessarily have to be trans is the thing. It could just be a man that's overtly feminine, which is in and of itself, yeah, it's like a queer performativity thing.
And I believe that the wonderful Dee is going to write that link for our mailing list in the chat right now. Yay, I can see it. For those of you who don't know Houseman's is an independent bookshop based in King's Cross in London since 1959. Houseman's specializes in books, magazines, and periodicals of radical interest and progressive politics, focusing on subjects such as feminism, Black politics, LGBTQIA+, the environment, and anarchism. We also host events such as this throughout the year. We will be reopening the store on Monday, so really look forward to seeing as many of you as possible in the shop. Please note, in order to ensure staff safety, we'll be operating a social distancing policy, so you may have to wait a little while to enter the shop. We also still have our online store at www.housemans.com. The Black Feminist Bookshop and Houseman's would like to thank Damika from Penguin and Emma and Michaela's PR and management teams for helping us to organize this event. Now for some housekeeping. Emma and Michaela look forward to your questions and comments, and there will be some time at the end for the discussion of this. If you have a question for Emma and Michaela, please make sure you put it in the Q&A box and not in the chat, because if you put it in the chat, there's a chance that it might get lost. In the Q&A box, you can ask questions anonymously, and you can also upvote for questions asked by members of the audience that you would like to see answered. In the instance of disconnection or technical mishap, please bear with us. We will be doing everything we can to reestablish connection, and your patience is very appreciated. Thank you once again for joining us. We hope you enjoy tonight's discussion. And now I'm going to hand you over to our amazing guests, Michaela and Emma. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that and that brilliant introduction. Emma, I'm so excited for this. Like reading your book, I literally shouted multiple times. Like, go off, sis. Like, it was so on point in so many ways and so deeply challenging. And I firstly just want to thank you for that and congratulate you for the fact that it has already in its first week been put on the New York Times bestseller.
As a reminder, this is from April of 2021. So this is a little old, right after the George Floyd rebellion or the George Floyd uprising. And what she just said is the book that they're talking about was a New York Times bestseller. So this isn't something that's just a little socialist book. This is a New York Times bestseller.
Bestseller list and the Irish Times bestseller list. So yeah, huge congratulations for that.
Thank you so much. It's not the New York Times. It hasn't come out in America yet, but the Sunday Times.
Oh,
the Sunday Times.
The Sunday Times.
Strike
and
that.
the Irish
Reverse
Times.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. But
the American releases in June.
Cool. Okay,
so one hopes that the same thing happens there.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's honestly, I found it deeply, deeply challenging. So someone who exists in like a lot of online spaces, which is something that you talked about a lot, and platform activism and online activism. I found a lot of what you said and your criticisms of anti-racism as it has been done in many ways really deeply challenging. And I would just like to hear from you what do you think are the kind of the biggest things holding back anti-racism work at the moment?
Pop quiz. What does anti-racism mean? What do socialists believe anti-racism means? Let me see in the chat. What does anti-racism mean specifically? Anti-racism means anti-capitalism, 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 anti-capitalism. We know this. This is not theoretical for anyone who might be new. We know this because Veriso Books, who is another socialist book publisher, quite literally published a book with the title, what is anti-racism and why it means anti-capitalism. So this is not something that they're being covert about. Anti-racism means anti-capitalism. It means anti-capitalism. 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 Anti-racism is anti-capitalism. Anti-capitalism. Anti-capitalism because slavery was capitalist? Yes, because slavery was created by capitalism. And because slavery was created by capitalism, it created systemic racism, which is the disparities based on race that they say is an outcome of slavery. And the only way to get rid of systemic racism is to abolish capitalism, because capitalism is the core problem in the first place.
That's a big question to start with. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. My head just started like, I think my headphones are too tight and my bun is too tight. And then the combination of those two tensions with your question, my head just went boom. But I'm grand. Yeah, geez. So as I say in the book, so in one way, what's happening now is like incredibly exciting, and I've never seen such a thirst and desire for conversation about change and actually having, race and racism as something that is being discussed in the mainstream rather than just being.
Hang on. What did I say about no debunking? This is debunking. John, these people do not believe that there was slavery before capitalism because they believe that the only reason that slavery exists is because of capitalism. That's the profit. Remember, these people define capitalism as private property ownership. That is their only definition of capitalism. Private property ownership has always existed. Always. There has never been a time in human history where private property ownership hasn't existed. These people think that the only reason that slavery became a thing was because of the profit motive associated with production that was the result of private property ownership.
Something like very fringe or taboo that you don't talk about. But what I worry about is that we are presented with a historic opportunity. I won't say it's unprecedented because that falls into that ahistorical thing that I think happens a lot at the moment. There have been other.
The people that we are talking about are not Klaus Schwab and they're not the WEF. These people have nothing to do with Klaus Schwab and the WEF. Those are the Malthusians. It's a completely different group. They have different goals. They have different priorities. There is some overlap between their goals in that ultimately they kind of want some of the same things. But these people do not get along with the WEF people. These people do not like the WEF people at all. So I don't talk about Klaus Schwab and the WEF because they are not related to these groups.
Moments in time in the past kind of few centuries where I don't even want to call it anti-racist, but liberation around race and freedom has been kind of at the forefront of social unrest and
liberation means to free oneself from capitalism
and popular culture. But I think that what's happening now is there often isn't a connection with those earlier movements. A lot of those earlier movements are very inspiring to me because they are centered more around collective liberation rather than individual advancement, and kind of they are interested often in, the creation of alternative and parallel institutions rather than focusing on inclusivity in institutions and systems that have inequality kind of embedded into their function. So I feel that currently as well, there's these conversations, but even the term conversation itself, has been elevated to kind of like an obscene status where we need to have that conversation. We need to start to have that conversation, and conversation almost becomes a replacement for any type of like real organizing or action. And another thing that I see happen a lot is taking the concepts and ideas and even phrases from that past organizing that's more collective in its approach and seems to be more strategic and more focused on outcomes, taking concepts and words but untethering them from that radical and expansive environment in which they were created, and having quite reductive interpretations of them that are used for kind of interpersonal, the resolution of interpersonal grievances rather than an attempt at kind of creating a mass movement that could really bring around systemic change.
And that links back to what you were saying about inclusion, because I remember you tweeted a while ago about how the revolution won't be diversity in advertising campaigns, and I think I wrote like a whole post like after that, because that there is this idea, I think, a lot, especially online, of kind of more representation politics and more representation of people who hold marginalized identities in systems that are already harmful and that are harmful, and that being liberation.
When they're talking about systems, what are they talking about? Every single time they say system, what are they talking about? No, Cassandra, they're very smart and they're winning and they're kicking your ass. So if you want to call these people stupid, then you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself why you're losing to stupid people. When they're talking about systems, they mean capitalism. Capitalism, 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 capitalism. It's important to keep that in mind because they're going to talk about so they were just talking about diversity efforts, right? So all of these organizations in response to the George Floyd uprising or the George Floyd rebellion, which is what these people call the riots of 2020, all these organizations started doing diversity training in their workplace. They started diversifying the models that they used in ads to make sure there was a requisite number of Black people and brown people and people in wheelchairs and all that stuff. These two are saying, well, it's not enough to do diversity. It's not enough to do these diversity trainings. It's not enough to have more brown people in ads. That's not going to fix the problem. What do they propose as a solution to these systemic problems? What will be the only solution that they perceive to be acceptable? And again, Cassandra, they're winning, so they're living in some reality because they're winning really badly. Perhaps it's you who's not living in reality. The reason I bring this up, guys, is that the minute that you dismiss these people, they win. They're winning already. If you continue to dismiss them by saying they're stupid, they're not living in reality, they're libtards, they're mentally ill, blah 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 blah. Well, they're winning, so what does that make you? So, when these people say that diversity is not enough to fix the systemic problems, their solution is going to be get rid of capitalism. Abolish the system, which is capitalism. Socialism or Marxism. Socialism. Abolish capitalism. Bring in Marxism. Total collectivism. Paula got there. This is the word that I was looking for. Equity. Equity is the solution to systemic racism because the foundational idea of equity is that we have to abolish capitalism because you cannot achieve a fully equitable society without abolishing capitalism. These people might call themselves anarchists, but they're not anarchists. They're not. I'm an anarchist. I don't believe the government should exist. I don't want the government to exist. People can have all the feelings they want about that. I don't believe the government should exist. These people are not anarchists. They call themselves anarchists because they want to, quote unquote, smash the state. But it's not that they don't want a government to exist. They want to smash the capitalist government. They want to abolish the capitalist government and replace it with their own socialist government.
When actually, what you're saying is that's so far divorced from where from collective liberation, from past struggles, and from past groups that we can learn so much from.
Collective liberation means abolish capitalism.
I that's something that I really resonated with in your book, was especially around talking about inclusion and challenging those ideals. Is that something that I've definitely been thinking about a lot?
Yeah, like if we have systems that have inequality as fundamental to their operation.
Really, Bill, because you think that a government is preferable to what we have now, or no government is how is the mob not ruling now, Bill? How is the mob not ruling now exactly? And not only is the mob ruling, but it's costing all of us a boat ton of our own money that we never agreed to pay. So conservatives can cry all their little tears when I say I don't want there to be a government, because conservatives are inherently authoritarian themselves. Conservatives don't want to reduce the size of government. Conservatives just want to control government. That's why conservatives are so in favor of the fucking government, because they're just as authoritarian as the left. They want to control just as much as the left. They want to steal just as much of our money as the left does. Conservatives want to indoctrinate just as many children as the left does.
Operating logic, even if certain groups who experience exploitation and oppression manage to get their seat at the table within that system, the system still exists, and it will be at somebody else's expense. You know, the Irish were oppressed when they first went to America, fleeing the famine, which was, you know, a result of the British colonialism in Ireland that killed 1 million Irish and forced another Irish.
Hang on. To be really clear, I always said I was going to keep my commitments through the end of the year. I didn't say I was 100% continuing after that. We're going to have to see. But I'm keeping my commitments through the end of the year. We're going to keep running things through the end of the year. For everyone who thinks that this means I'm not quitting, I haven't made that commitment yet. I want to be very clear about this. I don't want any mismanaged expectations. I always said I would keep my commitments through the end of the year, and then we're going to have to see. Because I am sick and tired of my work not being valued. I am sick and tired of being shit on. I am sick and tired of having to spend more time fighting with the political right than I actually spend fighting with the left, even though that's what I focus on 90% of the time. So we're going to have to see. I don't mean to like burst anyone's bubble, but that's just the way it is.
Another million to flee, and most of them went to America. They went to America and they entered into like a grossly unjust system that was initially discriminatory to them, but they got their seat at the table and did well in material, in terms of material gains. But that didn't challenge the system. You know, the boot was on the neck of Black Americans and other racialized people. So this kind of, you know, representational identity politics is inadequate, and is even in some ways strengthening.
Why do I fight with conservatives all the time? Because they shit on me, they smear me, they defame me, they lie about me. They cause so many problems. They've tried to destroy my work on multiple occasions. Perhaps go tell the conservatives to stop fucking with what I'm doing, and maybe I would spend less time fighting with them.
The power structures that we should be challenging.
Yeah, because that really links to, so obviously I take everything from a climate lens, which I see as a way which we can build coalition so much more, because the climate crisis is something that impacts everyone, and it's an issue that we must kind of unite behind, and that's something I'd like to touch on a bit later. And one thing that under kind of climate justice, you see fossil fuel industries putting a lot of money into things called, like social licensing campaigns, or things that will give them a social license to exist. And so in that example, you can see how things that might seem like inclusion or seem like increasing diversity or this representation kind of politics there actually allows a harmful industry to continue to exist, because people think this industry is ethical and great because they have an activist be on their campaign, or they have like more Black people in the fossil fuel industry, when actually, if that system itself is inherently harmful and able to continue, that's where this representation can actually cause more harm.
Right. Exactly. And even in instances where it's not like, where maybe it's not even so nefarious, and so actually giving a diverse facade to deeply destructive, you know, processes, it's still problematic in that this obsession with visibility is, you know, something we need to be mindful of. I would just love to read a quote from, it's from the book, but I'm quoting a scholar, a study of African America.
Okay, since now apparently people are focused on the fact that I'm saying that conservatives have made my life a living, breathing hell for the last 3 years, let me be explicit. When I say conservative, I mean conservative. Conservative encompasses MAGA, it encompasses neocons, it encompasses everyone on the political fucking right. Your group is not exempt from the people who have caused me bullshit for the past 3 fucking years. And this is why I don't know that I'm going to be continuing this in the new year, because I'm constantly having to fight bullshit like this. Even the argument now about whether or not, do I hate conservatives? Do I hate neocons? Do I hate MAGA? You know, Carlin, those are not all the same thing. As though in the past 3 fucking years, I haven't been told every day of my life, you know, Carlin, neocons and conservatives are not the same thing, and MAGA and conservatives are not the same thing, and da-da-da-da-da. No. So far as I'm concerned, they're all the fucking same. So if you don't want to be here and focus on the presentation, then go away.
Studies called George Lipsitz.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, my mind just went blank. His surname is Lipsitz. Pretty sure. Oh my God, he's like one of my favorite writers. I'm so tired. I've been having these conversations.
No, I can imagine like you're on the book
like
promo train.
Yeah. So please bear with me. Yeah. Okay. So collective goals. Okay. So collective goals seem to have been replaced by visibility. Mm-hmm. Long gone, it seems, are the organized strikes of the Black liberation movements of the 1960s. As Lipsitz notes, there is little evidence of the parallel institutions that were built then: the freedom schools, the community banks, the community land trusts, the breakfast clubs. Where's the program? Where's the consistent set of demands characterizing and unifying this current moment? Lipsitz continues, people will be seduced and bribed. I love this bit so much. People will be seduced and bribed by thinking that if they're visible, that their politics are viable, that as long as they live in an economy of prestige, the image of them acts as a simulacrum of reality. But he warns, ethnic studies can do very well, while ethnic people are doing very badly. Or it could equally be ethnic influencers can do very well, while ethnic people are doing very badly, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I know that I, as someone who has a platform and has been involved in conversations around a lot of this stuff and with brands, for example, for a long time, I remember thinking, oh, if these people would support what I'm saying and allow me to say whatever I want to say, that means that that's making progress, or that's great. But actually, they just want to co-opt those ideas in order to allow themselves to exist. And visibility, or kind of the propulsion of one individual to a higher standing, doesn't really do much to the bottom line, like to people who really, really need change. And that isn't how we move in a collective. Like, it should always be about the we and rather than about the I. And it should think, how is this action actually going to impact all of us as a community? Is this pushing the whole community forward, or is it just pushing an individual forward? I think there's so much in there, because kind of also what you're saying, it's not just, I also agree that I don't think it's just the individual's fault. And too often we can I think I can blame way too much. I'll be like, I can't believe that person has done this. Like, I'm let down by them. And it made me realize how much I dehumanized other people as well, to make them into a product almost, that I can dictate what is right or wrong. And I'm not really acknowledging how much systems play into this, and like how all of us live under these systems that manipulate us.
Yeah, completely. And like the thing about capitalism is it's a system that you're compelled to participate in, you know? So, you know, like sometimes, what's that meme that goes around, and it's like somebody is, I think it's like, it's got like kind of a 16th century peasant, and he's really like put upon, he's carrying some heavy load, and he's like, oh, like society is terrible and oppressive, we should try and change it. And then this little person pops out of a well and is just like, and yet you live in society, I'm very clever, you know? So like saying, oh, but you participate in this and that, so you can't actually be critical of these processes. Like one of the things I write about in the book is this Actually, it's the idea. There's a quote I take from a tenet of allyship, where it says the ally has the choice as to.
We learned the term comp het yesterday. Does anyone remember what comp het means? Does anyone remember that yesterday? Here's a hint. She just said that people are compelled to participate in capitalism. Compelled heterosexuality. Exactly. Compelled heterosexuality. Or compelled heteronormativity. That could be true as well. Compelled heterosexuality. Exactly.
Like, and allies like aren't, I can't remember the quote off the top of my head, but it's something to do, it's something along the lines of the ally like having a choice about whether they're oppressed or not. And I'm like, you know, that's actually, if it's a white ally, okay, they're not like experiencing racism, but they don't necessarily like have a choice. We live in a system that we are like actually, we live in a.
Well, you're saying this to be a smartass, but this is not necessarily false. Why is this not necessarily false? Why is what acoustic theory is saying not necessarily false? Don't just say a one-word answer. I'm not going to show it on the screen if you're just saying a one-word answer. Because they think capitalism enforces cis heteronormativity. Yup. Because, well, no, not exactly. Well, I mean, they do uphold the gender binary. Well, maybe, I guess you could say that's kind of technically correct. Because to them, capitalism upholds normalcy. Normalcy means the norm, like standard deviation norm. Capitalism upholds normalcy. Capitalism also created the gender binary. Being gay can go against, it can be queer if it goes against the normal. It doesn't necessarily always mean that, though. Traditional families reproduce the capitalist system. Exactly. Well, being gay can uphold homonormativity, which is similar to heteronormativity. Because capitalism created the gender binary, which values heterosexuality. Yes! Perfect answer, acoustic theory. That's a great answer, because capitalism created the gender binary, which values heterosexuality for the production of people to exploit. Well done.
A system of capitalist exploitation that we are compelled to participate in order to survive. You know, so one of my issues with the kind of allyship and anti-racist like framework is that it kind of is decontextualized. It's often referring to things as though we don't live within this framework of capitalism, as though we're just like autonomous agents with kind of.
Hang on, I'm sorry we're pausing a lot, but people are asking questions and I view it as part of my job to answer questions. Brian says, well, I watch a couple times a week and everything changes. No, it doesn't. It doesn't change. What changes, Brian, is your understanding of it. But the fundamentals don't change. These people are incredibly consistent. How do they all speak the same language without a reference of some sort? Well, when you have been indoctrinated into an ideology from kindergarten all the way up through grade school, all the way through college, when all of your friends are indoctrinated into the ideology, when the only people that you speak to are indoctrinated into the ideology, when the only books you read are about the ideology, when the only classes you go to are run by people in the ideology, when the only people that you talk to are in the cult, you learn the language. It's a language. They are fluent in the language of socialist in the same way that I'm fluent in the language of English, in the same way that people in France are fluent in the language of French, in the same way that people in Mexico are fluent in Spanish. Socialist is a language that they learn through every educational experience they have, through every group they're a part of, through every book they read. That's why they all speak the same language.
Well, not us, but certain groups are autonomous agents with unlimited freedoms. That's not the case. You know?
Yeah. The assumption that the amount of agency that people have in a certain group is homogenous, which just isn't true. And that's why you talk about kind of the idea of intersectionality of struggles rather than intersectionality of identities. And I think that is something that is really compelling and important for movements to, and especially people who've learned most of their anti-racism from infographics, to engage with, because there's no homogenous experience of people who hold different kind of identities. Like, there is no homogenous Black experience. There's also no homogenous experience of other identities, and we can't. And when we do homogenize them, I guess we're undermining the reality of capitalism and how that impacts people. We're undermining the reality of other oppressive systems.
What schools are teaching this? Every school in America. Every school in America. Every public K through 12 school in America is teaching this to greater or lesser degrees. Some are teaching it more than others. Some have it more fully integrated into the curriculum than others. But every single school district in America is teaching this right now. And then once you get into college, those are your advanced courses in this. But every single school district in the country is teaching this starting in kindergarten and have been for a long ass time. You're doing the linguistic portion. This is the linguistic portion. It's not performative. This is who these people are. They're talking to each other right now. This is who they are all the time. Don't joke about that. He's asking questions. I'm answering the questions. Don't say that.
Systems, and in many ways we let these other systems kind of continue to wreak havoc by ignoring the reality and expansiveness of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's become this, like, within this current like framework, there's become almost like a fetishization of interpersonal privilege, while class and capitalism are largely ignored, which like is completely the wrong emphasis.
Class and capitalism are largely ignored.
Orientation would sorry, one of my children has just appeared. So yeah, what I was going to say was, that idea of, like, you know, privilege and allies like transferring their privilege, and I just think there's a lot of lack of coherence or definition about what the privilege is. Because white privilege, as you know, kind of presented by Peggy McIntosh, which is, I think, the kind of definition that
hang on. She's about to give a definition of white privilege. Before she gives her definition of white privilege, I want us to give our definition of white privilege, and then I want to see how they match up. Fingers crossed. What does white privilege mean? Pop quiz for the chat. What does white privilege mean? We'll see how close our answer is to her answer. What does white privilege mean? White privilege means the beneficiary of capitalism. White privilege means capitalist privilege. The beneficiary of capitalism. The beneficiary of capitalism. The advantage of being in the bourgeois. A beneficiary of capitalism. White privilege means benefiting from capitalism. And remember, guys, capitalism is exclusively defined for this purpose as private property ownership. White privilege is those who benefit from the system of capitalism, beneficiaries of capitalism. White privilege is the beneficiary of capitalism. Exactly. Well done. Capitalist beneficiary. Exactly. Now let's see how she defines white privilege, and we'll cross our fingers that it's similar.
Privilege as, you know, kind of presented by Peggy McIntosh, which is, I think, the kind of definition that she's the one who kind of, I don't know if she coined the phrase, but mainstreamed the use of it in 1998 in her essay Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. Mm-hmm. And then that has kind of become increasingly mainstreamed over the past kind of, I guess, 5 years. That kind of talks about, you know, the unracialized. So whiteness is, even though whiteness is a construction, a racialized construction, the way it differs from all of the other racial categories is that white people are seen as unracialized. You know, they're seen as the default norm from which everybody else deviates, you know. So white privilege is, in that conception, seen as existing without that burden of being racialized and all the kind of punitive and disadvantageous things that come with that. So if it's about being kind of racialized in a white body, existing in a white body and being unracialized, how can that be transferred how can that experience be transferred to somebody who's racialized? If it's more of an economic transfer of privilege, that, because the demands I see is more like, you know, access to spaces, access to resources, as it should be. But that should be framed as a redistribution of resources at a far more like systematic level, rather than framed as interpersonal exchanges between individuals. You know, that's kind of a...
When she distinguished between the skin color and the privileges that you get as part of the economic system is capitalism. Now, she's doing some word salad thing where she's like thinking out loud and she's not putting it together cohesively, but that's what she just said. That it's not that thinking about this in terms of skin color is actually too small. What we have to do is zoom out and look at it from an economic perspective. Did everyone pick up on that? Well, there is, Alden, actually, because white privilege means beneficiary of capitalism in the land of socialists, and we're not debunking the socialists because that's not what we're doing here. So I recommend you all sit back and learn. Economic perspective equals capitalism. Exactly.
Highway to nowhere. And so it all becomes locked in this kind of, in these interpersonal...
Hang on, some people want to hear that again. So we'll go back and we'll do that again so you guys can hear.
So white privilege is, in that conception, seen as existing with...
Nope. Wrong. This is not about skin color. Guys, I know the conservatives in the chat are desperate to make this about skin color. I know every part of you is screaming to make this about skin color. This is not about skin color. It's not about skin color. It's not about skin color. If I have to keep saying it's not about skin color, I'm going to shoot myself in the head. Okay, not really. I'm being hyperbolic, but that's what I feel like at this point, which is why I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this at the beginning of the year. Anyway, let's listen again.
Without that burden of being racialized and all the kind of punitive...
Who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? No, bro. I've sat here and said it's not about skin color 5 different ways from Sunday.
And disadvantageous things that come with that. So if it's about being kind of racialized in a white body, existing in a white body and being unracialized, how can that be transferred how can that experience be transferred to somebody who's racialized? If it's more of an economic transfer of privilege, that, because the demands I see
Economic
is more
transfer.
like you know, access to spaces, access to resources, as it should be, but that should be framed as a redistribution of resources at a far more like systematic level,
Redistribution of resources,
framed as interpersonal exchanges between individuals. You know, that's kind of a highway to nowhere. And so it all becomes locked in this kind of, in these interpersonal grievances, you know, and online is just full of that. Like, I almost can't bear it.
No, I totally hear what you're saying here as well. And I just want to read a bit where I think this is just under where you've just talked about the redistribution of resources rather than just talking about vague privilege and whiteness. And you write that my fear is that much of the anti-racist literature is an iteration of the same process of maintaining and reaffirming whiteness. Little in the mainstream anti-racist narrative focuses on challenging the idea of white people itself. Rather, it takes the category as an unassailable truth, with the emphasis placed instead on making white people nicer through a combination of begging, demanding, cajoling, and imploring.
Emily,
and
that's
this
not
is a bit
correct.
I like scribbled. There's also many notes in this book, but I scribbled around because like, it really
I'm going to recommend, Emily, that instead of arguing with me, which is explicitly against the rules of Socialism Saturday, that you listen. That's going to be my recommendation. If you want to spend time every moment you spend arguing with me, you are not listening.
Confronted me with how, even though I, in lots of my organizing work, hold these anti-capitalist ideals and would practice these and talk about coalition and everything, I was still
Wait. Did she just say anti-capitalist? No, well, it says anti-catalyst, but I think she just said anti-capitalist. Hang on. Let's listen again.
I just want to read a bit where I think this is just under where you've just talked about the redistribution of resources rather than just talking about vague privilege and whiteness. And you write that my fear is that much of the anti-racist literature is an iteration of the same process of maintaining and reaffirming whiteness. Little in the mainstream anti-racist narrative focuses on challenging the idea of white people itself. Rather, it takes the category as an unassailable truth, with the emphasis placed instead on making white people nicer through a combination of begging, demanding, cajoling, and imploring. And this was a bit I like scribbled. There's also many notes in this book, but I scribbled around because like, it really confronted me with how, even though I, in lots of my organizing work, hold these anti-capitalist ideals and would practice these and talk about coalition and everything, I was still in my online kind of world enhancing this idea of whiteness whilst trying to like dismantle white supremacy at the same time, by making it just about interpersonal and by not focusing on like enough on the more structural side of it and the intersections it has inherently with capitalism.
Boom!
And I think that
I knew she was going to get there. I fucking knew she was going to get there. She just said exactly what I explained at the beginning. That whiteness is not about skin color. Whiteness is about systemic racism, the system level, which is capitalism. She literally just said that. Did everyone hear it? Did everyone see that? She meandered a little bit, but she said, you know, the mistake that I made is I was really focusing on making white people nicer, whereas I should have been focusing on the system being capitalism, whiteness as a system, which means capitalism. Let's listen again, because that was just beautiful. And she also combined it with anti-racist too, because as we know, anti-racist means anti-capitalist.
I totally hear what you're saying here as well. And And I just want to read a bit where I think this is just under where you've just talked about the redistribution of resources rather than just talking about vague privilege and whiteness. And you write that my fear is that much of the anti-racist literature is an iteration of the same process of maintaining and reaffirming whiteness. This in the mainstream anti-racist narrative focuses on challenging the idea of white people itself. Rather, it takes the category as an unassailable truth, with the emphasis placed instead on making white people nicer through a combination of begging, demanding, cajoling, and imploring. And this was a bit I like scribbled. There's also many notes in this book, but I scribbled around because it really confronted me with how, even though I, in lots of my organizing work, hold these anti-capitalist ideals and would practice these and talk about coalition and everything, I was still in my online kind of world enhancing this idea of whiteness whilst trying to like dismantle white supremacy at the same time, by making it just about the interpersonal and by not focusing on like enough on the more structural side of it and the intersections it has inherently with capitalism. And I think that I was doing a lot of the like just trying to make white people nicer, and I was just really, really like hit by this.
No, Lizard, and you've been around long enough to know better. You do not have to have white skin in order to engage in whiteness, which means capitalism. It has nothing to do with your skin color. So non-white cultures can still engage in whiteness because non-white cultures can still engage in capitalism. And if you don't believe me, you can go watch the clips I have of Cheryl Harris, who is the author of the paper Whiteness is Property, in a speech she gave at UCLA Law School in 2014, in which she explicitly says that whiteness is not about skin color. You have been around my channel long enough to know this. I know I've explained this to you on multiple occasions. I don't want to have to explain this to you again.
This, I think, and really moved. But I'm sure that a lot of other people who have read the book so far, and anyone who's watching this who hasn't bought the book yet, I don't know what you're doing. Come on, hurry up. But this was something that this like, I think it's a book that is not. There are great quotes in it, but it's the kind of book you need to read the whole thing because of the context that's in there as well, and the historical context. That was definitely a quote or a bit that I was kind of arrested by. I'd like to hear you speak a little bit on what you mean by enhancing whiteness through anti-racism work. I know that you talk about it within the book, but just like a little bit of context.
Yeah, so I see a reinvestment in racial categories, not just whiteness. I'm also seeing like a lot of conversations about like race being biologically real. I mean, that's something that is advanced. That's something that was so race is invented in like the 1660s in colonial Barbados in order to first of all justify the dehumanization of Black people. Sorry, they're not Black at this stage. To justify the dehumanization of Africans who are being enslaved, this notion of a Black race that is inherently inferior is introduced, and a white race that is inherently superior, to justify dehumanization and enslavement of the.
So what she just said, and I've never heard someone say it started in the 1660s in Barbados. That's a new one for me. But what she just said is actually very like similar to what I said she was going to say at the beginning, which is whiteness was created when the first Black slaves came to America because they had to create the category of whiteness, which meant private property ownership, because slavery is based on private property ownership, and the system was built up to support the white private property owners and the slaves that were oppressed property within the system of slavery, which was caused by capitalism. And that's when these people believe race was invented. This Barbados thing is new to me. I've never heard someone made that argument before, but the argument is still similar enough that I feel like it doesn't really matter.
Group that now become known as Black or Negro, to use the terminology of the time, because these Western economies, well, these colonial economies and these colonies and the Western countries, the European countries that they are the colonies of, are becoming increasingly reliant on the obscene wealth that's being generated by this enslaved labor. So they have to justify the dehumanization of the workforce. The other reason, it's the other motivating factor is in Barbados, you have a situation where there are indentured Irish who've been sent there because of English colonialism. Oliver Cromwell is rampaging through Ireland and like killing loads of people and sending loads of people to Barbados as indentured labourers. So you have the Irish and the indentured Irish labourers and enslaved Africans working together on English plantations and sometimes Scottish plantations as well. And there's a series of revolts where the Africans and the Irish come together and attack the landlord class. What the notion of race does is to shut down those emergent, essentially class solidarities that are emerging because they're really threatening to the status quo. There's more of those people. There's more oppressed people, and so white people, even who are indentured laborers, start to see their fate and their future more in alignment with other white people, even if it's a class.
I am really sick of people coming in and trying to debunk them when I have explicitly explained that we're not debunking people. Please stop fucking trying to debunk these people. This is not the point of this exercise. Every single moment that you spend debunking these people, you are not listening to these people. Cut out the fucking debunking. This makes no fucking difference at all. Autistic people are smart, Lizard, and you've been around long enough to know better, and I'm not going to take this "I'm autistic, I'm not capable of learning" as an excuse, because you are capable of learning. Other people might have low expectations for you. I do not have low expectations for you. You've been around the channel long enough to know better. Thank you for the super chat, but if you expect me to have lower expectations for you because you're autistic, you are going to be resoundingly disappointed. Have higher expectations of yourself, bro.
Of white people who exploit their labor. And again, you see the same thing happen in colonial Virginia not long after that, after Bacon's Rebellion, where indentured English servants and enslaved Africans come together, this union of commoners, and then they start to codify into law this notion of blackness and whiteness and bring in these really draconian laws that remove any claim to any rights to people who are now understood as black. So that construction of race is from the same historical period that we're seeing the form of capitalism that is going to become the dominant kind of world system. Okay, so the origins of that.
Excuse me, hang on.
Is black. So that construction of race is from the same historical period that we're seeing the form of capitalism that is going to become the dominant kind of world system.
Really?
Okay, so the origins of that racial construction are intimately linked to the origins of capitalism, and part of that construction is to.
Do you hear that? Racial construction is intimately linked with capitalism. One more time.
Construction of race is from the same historical period that we're seeing the form of capitalism that is going to become the dominant kind of world system. Okay, so the origins of that racial construction are intimately linked to the origins of capitalism, and part of that construction is to help consolidate capital, essentially, in the various ways that I've explained. It is crucial that one more thing to add. So race starts to be kind of streamlined from that period, and then the idea of a white race and a black race, spreads throughout the world. In the 19th century, so in the 18th.
She literally just said, Bill is correct about this, capitalism created black and white. That's because they believe capitalism created slavery. Slavery created black and white. It is the premise of these people that the black race and the white race did not exist before slavery. It's not that the skin colors didn't exist, it's that they were not called black and white. They were called English or Irish or French or Nigerian or African or like whatever their country of origin was, that is what they were called. The identities of like white skin and black skin, according to these people, did not exist before slavery. Slavery created them as a way of perpetuating the system that oppressed people as private property and created systemic disparities as a result. The origin point of all of this is capitalism. Does everyone understand? Racial construction is linked, not with the origin of capitalism, is caused by capitalism, is caused by private property ownership. Well, I only have to answer this question every single fucking day, but I'll answer it again because I think you're new here. Yes, the average person on the street understands this. Yes, they do. The only people who don't understand this are conservatives who are obsessed with race, who are obsessed with talking about race, who are obsessed with seeing white people as the poor abused victim of the world when they're not. Literally the only fucking people who don't understand this are conservatives. The kids understand this. The college students understand this. The college professors understand this. These people understand this, and we know that because we've heard them say it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. The only people who do not understand this are the conservatives who are obsessed with so-called anti-white racism because they just want white people to be poor abused victims of the world, because conservatives have a persecution fetish where they get off on being persecuted. Every time a conservative sees themselves as a victim of the world because they're a white person, they get off on it. So, yes, they understand this. You guys are the only ones who don't. I'm sorry. That's just the way it goes. And conservatives are baited by this every single goddamn day because they refuse to understand this.
This is reinvested in through the advent of scientific racism. Now, scientific racism purports to show that, to demonstrate that Black people are entirely different species to white people, and that this can be shown through these types of pseudosciences that take race as a biological truth. I am now seeing a lot of people talking about race being a biological truth, and I'm seeing that in tangent and not necessarily separate from all of this anti-racism conversation that's happening. So we are actually, like, in this time reinvesting in that truth status of a race.
Illustration Station, do you know how I know normies understand this? Because I was watching happy hour presentations for 2 years before I started watching socialism, and in almost every single goddamn happy hour presentation, which happy hour is corporate diversity training, happy hour are college classes, sometimes we watch high school classes, we watch podcasts with high school kids in them. Happy hour is much later than Socialism Saturday. Happy hour is normies. Happy hours on Fridays are normies. These are socialists. We watch the normies on Friday. In almost every single presentation that I've watched in the 3+ years of happy hour, they talk about capitalism. In almost every single one of them, like clockwork. This is how I started understanding that this was coming from the far left socialists, because in every single happy hour presentation we watched, the normies were talking about the dangers of capitalism and how capitalism created slavery and capitalism created race. Every single whiteness training we've ever watched talks about the evils of capitalism. So yes, normies understand this. I don't know, like, guys, I'm going to be honest. This is why I'm on the verge of quitting. This stuff right here. Because I've been saying the same thing for 3 fucking years. I've been showing evidence for 3 fucking years. I have a massive archive of this stuff over 3 years, thousands of videos, thousands of hours of this stuff over 3 years. And I still have to say the same thing every day because people are not listening. Normies understand this. Kids in school understand this. College students understand this. Woke social justice warriors understand this. The only people that do not understand this are conservatives. That's it. Everyone else understands this. All the normie leftist friends I have hate capitalism. I wonder why that is. I wonder why that is. If you know any leftists or any normal people, go and ask them about their perceptions of capitalism at some point. That's not true. Stop fucking lying. And I know it's not true because I have it on video, thousands of hours of it over 3 fucking years. Just because you haven't seen it, because your influencers failed you, because the people who are supposed to teach you failed you and refuse to tell you the fucking truth, does not mean that normal people don't understand this. It means your influencers fucking failed you. Would people like to continue arguing with me about this, or should we continue? If you want to know why I'm on the verge of quitting, it's because conservative influencers have so fucked up their audiences that their audiences are absolutely incapable of understanding this point. And if they don't understand this point, nothing else really fucking matters. So we lost because conservative influencers fucked up their audiences. Does everyone feel good about that? While the left was working and teaching their ideas at every level in the school system, for decades and decades and decades and decades and decades and decades and decades, conservative influencers were lying to their audiences, telling them all they're poor white fucking victims of the world, and now they refuse to fucking listen. They refuse to listen.
Racial taxonomy and hierarchy that should be being dissolved. You know, Stuart Hall, the great Jamaican British, the godfather of cultural studies. You know, African Caribbean people have contributed so much to Britain. Like I'm reading that Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities report. It's on my desk now, and the way African Caribbean people in particular, I feel are demonized in that, and are presented as it's actually just really shocking. I think African Caribbean people, Black Caribbean people have contributed, you know, if I can identify any group who've been like so influential, I think, you know, Blackness is also a generic category that obscures like lots and lots of differences. A group that's been so influential, it are like African Caribbeans, and not just in the more obvious ways like, you know, kind of music and youth culture where they've been massively influential, but also like intellectually, in terms of literature, in terms of cultural studies. Like so much of the framework of how we understand and approach culture comes from cultural studies, which is essentially, you know, Stuart Hall, this Jamaican British scholar, is the godfather of. So Stuart Hall talks about the fact that oh, I've jumped off a bit. Yeah, he talks about the fact that he talks about loads of things, and I talk about him in the book, but now I've just tried to cram in too much stuff. But yeah, so you're seeing this idea of race as like biologically real, re-emerging, and these kind of emergences of kind of ethno-nationalism, not just from white people.
But these people do not believe that race is biologically real. Really think about that. They do not believe that race is biologically real. So if they don't believe that race is biologically real, then how in the world could whiteness mean skin color? Because skin color is dictated by our biology.
But you're also seeing less extreme. You're seeing people just talk about Black people and white people all the time as though those are really like cohesive and meaningful categories. Like my book is called What White People Can Do Next, but I immediately say like a couple of pages. It could have been called What Everybody Can Do Next.
Yeah, for sure.
But that doesn't have the same impact, you know?
She literally just admitted she put white people on the book cover because she was playing off of the George Floyd rebellion and all the book sales that were going off on the George Floyd rebellion. But it's like, really, and this means everyone. It doesn't necessarily mean white people, because race is not a biological reality. The only reason I put white people is to have the impact and sell books. She literally just said that.
But it says that let me just read a tiny bit. I have to say as well, sorry, my answers are super meandering, and that's
it's great. It's because
just the way I talk.
No, your brain is full of amazing things, and they all just come out, and we love it, and we're all learning so much. So thank you so much for sharing this with us.
my pleasure. So.
Because when they do, conservatives get all teed off, and the conservatives make themselves look like the racists that the social justice warriors say they are. And when conservatives make themselves look like racists, then the left takes that and uses it against conservatives to gain more power over conservatives and to win elections. They use it to confuse you. They use it to bait you. They use it to make you look like the monsters that they've been telling everyone you are anyway, so that you lose elections and that they gain more political power. That's why.
My discomfort, my own discomfort with the title of the book that I've chosen.
What I mean when I say normies is normal people, Brooklyn. I don't have a very specific definition. What I mean is normal people, normal kids in schools, normal teachers, normal college students. That's what I mean.
I was going to ask you about that actually, but we could.
No. I chose it, but I'll explain a bit more why. Mm-hmm. So. Okay, I'm just going to read like half a page. Is that cool?
Yeah, go for it.
It might even be a whole page. I'll read quickly.
Yeah,
whiteness is always there, ever present, determining who gets a chance and who is denied opportunity. But recently, I have been starting to visualize it like a horror film ghoul. It's looming in the shadows. It's threatening, but we can really activate it, energize it, and empower it by saying its name 3 times in the mirror. However, once evoked, what the fuck do we do with it? If we summon it and just leave it at large, free to run rampant and unchecked, it's game over as we're all subsumed by its murderous rampage. Much like a horror film baddie, we should invoke it only to slay it. To slay whiteness, and not to slay white people, okay? Let me be clear.
Oh, wait. Did you hear what she just said? To slay whiteness and not white people. Lizard, I need you to listen and to stop whining. I answered your question. If the answer is not clear, then you need to ask a more specific question. But I don't want any more whining. I just don't. We're going to go back and listen to this again because my point has been lost because people are arguing with me in the chat. Do you think they have socially conditioned conservatives and have them like reaction puppets? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. There is a clear distinction between whiteness and white people. Let's go back and listen again.
Much like a horror film baddie, we should invoke it only to slay it. to slay whiteness, and not to slay white people. Okay,
They're two different things.
Without that second crucial part, we remain under siege, doing its bidding, enthralled to its promises and lies. This is one of the numerous reasons I increasingly feel a sense of reluctance talking to or about a generic category of white people. This book is, of course, called What White People Can Do Next. While I wanted to create a concrete and practical resource, the title is also a provocation. Nonetheless, I'll skip a bit. Nonetheless, it catches your attention, which is precisely the intention. We have to set whiteness up, to name it, to frame it, in order to disassemble it. While, of course, there are parallels and experiential consistencies between people racialized as white, the differences that exist between white people in different parts of the world are also vast. Before we even get into region, socioeconomic class, beliefs, or political allegiances, I think that this diversity represents an opportunity to loosen the death grip of whiteness, a concept that was invented to flatten those differences in the first place. And I don't see that happening, you know, in the anti-racist conversations. I just see these.
Allow me to be very, very clear, guys. Unless you have a question about the presentation, please stop talking to me in the chat. Because what's happening right now is I have a chat full of people talking to me and sending me messages saying, I didn't mean this, I didn't mean that, I didn't mean this other thing. I don't care. What I care about is you listening and you learning. I thought I was being very clear about this, but apparently not clear enough. What I care about is you listening to the presentation, asking questions about the presentation, and learning. Half of the time that I've been talking to the chat, I have not been answering questions about the presentation. I have been answering questions about God knows what that has nothing to do what is in the presentation. It is distracting. It is infuriating. This is why I don't want to do this shit anymore. I am tired of being angry like this when I'm trying to teach people things because people will not follow the very simple fucking rules that I set at the beginning of the presentation. So stop talking to me and not listening to the presentation. If you have questions about the presentation, then ask them about the presentation. But that's what we should be doing here. And right now I have a whole lot of people who are not paying attention to the actual presentation at all, which means no one is learning anything. And I'm having to go back and listening to things several times because I can't focus on what's going on in the chat and what's going on in the presentation at the same time. Does everyone understand? My only goal here is to watch the presentation and to teach the presentation. It is not to argue with you. It is not to debate with you. It is not to fucking fight with you. It is not to convince you of anything because, quite frankly, I don't fucking care if you believe this or not. If you don't believe it, go watch something else. But there are a lot of people here who want to learn the presentation, and we are not able to do that when I have a chat full of people talking to me. Does everyone understand? Now I have to go back and listen to this again.
Your attention, which is precisely the intention. We have to set whiteness up, to name it, to frame it, in order to disassemble it. While, of course, there are parallels and experiential consistencies between people racialized as white, the differences that exist between white people in different parts of the world are also vast. Before we even get into region, socioeconomic class, beliefs, or political allegiances, I think that this diversity represents an opportunity to loosen the death grip of whiteness, a concept that was invented to flatten those differences in the first place. And I don't see that happening, you know, in the anti-racist conversations. I just see these unproblematic assumptions and instructions to white people. I'm like, who are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, I think it even comes, like, for me, from being Irish. Like, I've seen things like, you know, white people turning down you know, maybe like an MB or an OB or whatever it's called. And then people being like, oh, that's just a performative action to be like an anti-racist ally, or to be you know, kind of be whitely performative for Black people. And I'm like, not necessarily. You know, a lot of white Irish people would turn down that thing, not because they're not necessarily because they're thinking about Black people, but because they are, you know, it's a post-colonial country in which many people are anti-imperialist, you know. So
I mean,
yeah,
it's
who are you
capitalism.
talking about? Who are the white people?
And that is such an important question, because I have definitely just said statements like white people, and
I mean,
really
we all have. We all have, and it happens to Black people all the time. Like, Black people are always just seen as a, you know, a homogenous.
But it's funny because I would have an issue if someone tried to homogenize the Black experience, and yet I was doing the same to the white to white experience, and not realizing how that was undermining everything, a lot of things that I was saying. And yeah, I think being challenged on that is, but that's why I think books are so great, because if we just leave everything to social media where it's all like sensationalized and it's all,
this whole part of the conversation is challenging the idea that skin color even exists, that race even exists. That's why they're having such a tough time with this, because they're trying to wrap their heads around the idea that in their ideology, this is not about skin color, and race is not a biological reality. So they want you to take it. No, not anti-whiteness. No, not anti-whiteness. I'm not even gonna, acoustic theory. If you want me to answer that, you need to retype that whole thing without using anti-white anything, because this is not about anti-whiteness.
just dramatic, and it's all about like making big statements and no nuance, then we're not really going to be able to challenge things and learn things and see the gray areas and the nuance that exists. Like, everything isn't as clear cut, and as that social media and infographic might be able to see, like 10 slides is not enough for any topic ever.
But because social media, you know, because of the framework of kind of all of the platforms,
do not use the term anti-white on this channel. That's going to be the general rule of thumb. Do not ever use the term anti-white on this channel. I don't allow it. I don't know if you know that, because I know you haven't been watching until recently. I do not allow the use of the term anti-white. That is a white identitarian term that is specifically created to try to convince fucking conservatives that this is about skin color when it's not about skin color. So don't ever use the term anti-white with me, because I'm just going to tell you not to use it.
Have to be in a kind of a bite-sized way, right? So that has its own issues. But then if you actually look at a platform like Twitter, like that actually, like, you know, gamifies like outrage, and highly emotive and reductive takes are the ones that are more rewarded, you know, in terms of likes and reshares, and because that's what your aim. The aim on those platforms isn't necessarily like collective change or liberation. It's like becoming as influential as possible, which is like through growing your platform, right? And growing your platform is usually done the way it's set up, you know, on Twitter, is to be highly emotive and to like charge people and to like trigger people, you know. So that doesn't really lend itself to kind of like careful and considerate discourse.
Yeah, it doesn't really lend itself to the reality of the world as not being as clear cut, and I recognize how how much social media can just make us fall into these pitfalls of even exhibiting this same kind of behavior in the quote unquote real world, like with actual human beings in front of us, and still upholding or exhibiting.
So they want you to forgo white privilege, well, that's being a beneficiary of capitalism, and take action to undermine capitalism for that sake, not because you are showing support for Black people. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. This is not about helping Black people at all in any way. They don't believe that Black people exist. They don't believe that white people exist. They don't believe that black people exist. So it isn't about helping black people. It's not about lifting anyone up. The only thing this is about capitalism. Sin, I'm developing a headache too. Go take care of yourselves. I wish I could leave.
Exhibiting this same behavior.
Anyone who talks to me from now on in the chat is getting timed out. Anyone, I'm serious, guys. I've asked nicely, and then I yelled, and now anyone that is talking to me in the chat or is saying things that are not directly related to the presentation, I'm going to time you out. And you can sit and think about it for 5 minutes until you come back. I'm sick of this. I have spent half of this fucking stream arguing with my fucking chat who all know the fucking rules and are not following. Maybe I should just cut the stream short. We have a presentation that is saying the quiet part out loud over and 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 over again. No one is fucking listening to it because you're all too busy talking to me rather than watching the presentation. Be more concerned about learning than you are with whether or not I like you, whether or not I agree with you. I will like you when you fucking learn. I will like you when you pay attention. I will like you when you give correct answers. I will like you when you ask thoughtful questions.
When it evidently doesn't make sense, and it can't be applied. And I've even seen within like organizing groups that I've been a part of, how social media kind of discourse has come into these organizing spaces and caused actual harm and more division in many ways, because it can just be so reductive of the reality of experiences, and it can also just waste us time sometimes just arguing about things and not doing things. Yeah.
And you know what, as well, loads of it, I see a lot of things that are inaccurate. Like they are objectively like wrong, okay? But then they become really popular. And if you want to be the person that points out that's wrong, well, do you want to do that? Do you want to like have that pile-on? Do you want to have that toxic kind of attack that you're running the risk of if you like step out of line, don't toe the party line?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one thing that we talked about on the Yikes podcast that I co-hosted this week. The episode was on, we just started it as like a vague episode about things that have made us yikes recently, and we ended up really talking about how much on social media you do get pulled into this like groupthink and that inability to step out or really challenge things but it's because it's kind of links this idea that through social media, and I think it's just a normal human thing that's existed for a long time, but we're unable to see the complexities of people. It's either we see someone as wholly terrible or wholly great, and there's no gray area in between. So as soon as we see someone that, even if it's someone that we really like, as soon as they do something wrong, we move them into the bad person category, and we dehumanize them to that extent, and we just want to kind of rip them apart. And on social media that happens on a huge scale because people are dehumanized even further. And yeah, I do think that it's this connection to our innate humanity, which you do also talk about in the book, that we need to like remember humanity and remember what makes us human and the connections that we have with each other, and move kind of a bit more away from just wanting to this kind of binary idea or pulling people apart, because in many ways it means that we do just waste time doing that, and we remove ourselves. It also connects out removing ourselves from nature and removing ourselves from the world as a whole as well.
Absolutely. And also the idea that our racial identities somehow like demonstrate our politics as well. The idea you're not just radical because you're black, you know, you can be like a committed black capitalist, and you're not radical just because you're white. You can be a white anti-imperialist, you know, like again, I think of Irish revolutionaries like James Connolly, who I'm really like inspired by, and they're white and they're radical.
What did she just say? Whiteness is a political identity. It is not about your skin color. It is a political identity. Did everyone hear that? Because I had like 3 people I just banned. Whiteness is a political identity. You can be a capitalist and be black, which means the black face of white supremacy. I'm going to rewind a little bit.
This connection to our innate humanity, which you do also talk about in the book, that we need to like remember humanity and remember what makes us human and the connections that we have with each other, and move kind of a bit more away from just wanting to, of this kind of binary idea or pulling people apart, because in many ways it means that we do just waste time doing that, and we remove ourselves. It also connects out removing ourselves from nature and removing ourselves from the world as a whole as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also the idea that our racial identities somehow like demonstrate our politics as well. The idea you're not just radical because you're black, you know, you can be like a committed black capitalist, and you're not radical just because you're white. You can be a white anti-imperialist, you know, like again, I think of Irish revolutionaries like James Connolly, who I'm really like inspired by, and they're white and they're radical, you know.
Yeah. Like, I guess that also then connects to the issue with representation politics, because it assumes characteristics that an individual from a group will hold, and therefore if they step into a space, then people assume that that individual also holds those same politics as well.
Yeah.
One thing I want to also talk about, which I really loved, is that you connect everything to the climate and ecological crisis always, and you always bring back to that. And I think that that is so great, because that's what climate justice is. Climate justice is a principle which sees that all of these oppressive issues are linked, and that they kind of intersect with the climate crisis, and that the climate crisis is a great multiplier of all of these other issues. And so we must be aware of those connections and act in accordance with those connections, and take a collective liberation framework to the actions that we're doing.
Collective liberation means abolish capitalism.
The same forces that have a disregard for Black life, for the lives of the Indigenous, for the marginalized, and for the lives of women, are the same forces that disregard the life of the earth itself. Individuals who see themselves apart from other people, who imagine themselves disconnected from the natural world over which they short-sightedly assume mastery, who see the destruction and degradation of life as a fair exchange for the tightly policed boundaries of ethno-nationalist identities, the pursuit of wealth, or the achievement of billionaire status.
Here's what I'm thinking right now, separately from this presentation. If I continue with this after the new year, I'm only doing this stuff for supporters from now on, is my general thought process. Because I think that the problems that I'm having with the chat, and the reason that I have to keep banning people who keep breaking the rules that I have clearly laid out over and over and over and over again, is because there are a lot of people in here who are not contributing at all, and therefore they do not value this. They do not value the energy that goes into this. They do not value my time. They do not value the knowledge that I've gained from watching thousands of hours of this bullshit and learning how to break it down bit by bit. They do not value it. So perhaps to cut down on the arguing and the bullshit and the headache that I have to deal with every single week from people openly disrespecting my time and disrespecting my energy, perhaps if I continue doing these, I will just make it a paid supporter thing. And that way, if people are breaking my rules, at least I'll still get paid for it.
I remember I was like, woo, yes. I'm so glad you said it, because this is what we need in our movements generally, is for it not to be like a book about race, or a book about climate, or a book about capitalism, because all of these things are connected, and it would completely reduce these issues to act as if, I don't know, to talk about race without talking about the climate crisis in the current day, it would just be bizarre to me, but it happens all the time.
So that I'm so glad that you read that quote as well, because I have noticed that I'm always reading it. So this is the first time I didn't have to, because you did it. So yay. And actually I was like asked who I wanted to like host this conversation, to be in conversation with, and you were like, I was just like, oh my God, I would love if Michaela was available and willing, because I love the work that you do.
Thank you so much. I'm so touched by that. Thank you so much.
It's true. You gave me hope in that online space. I mean, I'm not wholly against. Like, I'm very active online. There's a lot of people I follow that I'm inspired by. You being one of them. So I'm not wholly against it. I just am aware of its limitations and its dangers.
Yeah, and also we should be able to criticize things without also then being put into that category of thinking it's wholly bad. Like, I think we can participate in things and
100%.
criticize them.
Right? Of course. And actually, you can criticize something because you love it. I'm not saying I actually love like platform capitalism, but often the things that I bother to be critical of is actually because I care about them deeply and I'm really invested in them.
Yeah, or you recognize the power that they have. This is, for me, I think the reason that
there's also that as well.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm speaking for you, but the reason, that's why I think I criticize social media a lot, is because I recognize the power it can have.
Absolutely. I think I write about James Baldwin a lot in the book, and he kind of always says that his criticisms of America come from his deep connection to it from being American, like that he's critical of it because he wants it to be better. He wants it to do better. That's not my relationship to social media. I'm not using that as an example. But I'm thinking, maybe sometimes when I talk about racism in Ireland, for instance.
Yeah.
So sorry, my light's gone really weird because I had to move it because it was actually just shining directly into my eye and blinding me.
Your light is great.
Semi-blinding me. What were you asking me? Oh, so the ecological thing. Yeah. So the relationship between race and whiteness and capitalism, those systems that are kind of, being created in the early colonial period are also really centered around stealing the land from the Irish, actually from the English poor through the Enclosures Act by the elites. From
stealing the land is what colonization is. So the root cause of stealing the land is, of course, capitalism. It means taking the land that belonged to the collective, to the indigenous people, to whatever, and privatizing the land under the oppressive force of capitalism. That's what she means when she says stealing the land.
The Irish, Ireland is like the test ground, the laboratory for like English colonialism. In the Americas, from Native Americans, and then after that in Africa and in Asia. So that stealing of the land and that idea of the land being owned. So the land being private property that's owned and is used for productivity and is like ruthlessly kind of like exploited
under capitalism,
to create wealth. That relationship to the.
Let's listen to that again because she just said the quiet part out loud beautifully.
For like English colonialism in the Americas, from Native Americans, and then after that in Africa and in Asia. So that stealing of the land and that idea of the land being owned. So the land being private property that's owned and is used for productivity and is like ruthlessly kind of like exploited to create wealth. That relationship to the exploitation of the land is intimately linked, and the abuse of the land and the separation from the land, kind of that comes out of like European Western Enlightenment philosophy. And the destruction of the biosphere that is now looming it has its origins in those kind of like in that historical period and the systems that were put in place then. So it's also intimately linked to all of this stuff. And then obviously, because there's been so much organizing around environmental justice, as there has been, around race, and the stuff around the earth and the environment is obviously something that like actually deeply and personally affects everyone. So it opens up new and I think exciting opportunities. Not that I'm trying to put a positive spin on climate crisis, but exciting opportunities for new coalitions and new unexpected, affinities between people.
Yeah, and this is one thing that I think actually is important to emphasize is obviously the climate crisis is horrific and the impacts it's having now are horrific, but it also allows us an opportunity to enhance justice, because a lot of the solutions to the climate crisis that that see it as a justice issue also reduce inequality globally and also tackle other systems as well of oppression. And that's why, I just think that it can actually be really hopeful when we see climate.
For our purposes, imperialism and colonialism are roughly the same thing. I don't think it's really useful to distinguish between them because they both involve the conquering of land and oppressing it under capitalism, or like in the case of like the United Kingdom under like the monarchy and stuff like that. But it all boils down to land being privatized and taken away from the oppressed people, and then the oppressed people being forced to work the land under the oppressive force of capitalism. So they're not really sufficiently distinct enough so far as I'm concerned to really worry about the differences.
As a justice issue, because it shows how it encompasses everything and how we can actually have the ability to change things quite fundamentally, because it is an issue that affects all of us. And I'm recognizing that we can't, we need to talk about the connections that climate has with race, but we can't also just reduce climate to a racism issue solely, because, for example, in the Scottish context, we work, a group involved with Climate Camp Scotland, that we work with communities, and especially like with workers and more like rural communities and working class communities who are being impacted by the fossil fuel industry now. And a lot of times they get ignored because there isn't as much of an emphasis on the impacts of the climate crisis on working class communities, like within the UK, and especially how in the UK, like in the UK context, when it comes to climate justice, what class issues are hugely important to pay attention to as well. And what I hope is, I think it's so great that we're starting to talk about climate as a racial injustice issue, but we need to also expand that into all the other kind of oppressive issues and recognize how it isn't as simple or clear cut, and there is so much more nuance there, and there's so many intersections we need to be a part of, pay attention to.
And actually in the Scottish context, because I'm talking about whiteness as an erasure and a generic term that collapses crucial distinctions in order to consolidate capital. And I'm like, if white people are a relatively...
Are you serious? Are you serious? I'm talking about whiteness as a generic term used to consolidate capital.
And actually in the Scottish context, because I'm talking about whiteness as an erasure and a generic term that collapses crucial distinctions in order to consolidate capital. And I'm like, if white people are a relatively modern invention, who were white people before they were white? It's going to be different if you're English, Irish, Scottish. It's going to be different what part of the world you're in.
See?
But then in relation to the environment, I recently came across the word, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it properly because I've not heard it.
What existed before white people? They referred to themselves by their country of origin. So it's not as though people with white skin haven't always existed. It's that they referred to themselves as their country of origin. What they're saying is the category of white people did not exist, and the category of black people did also not exist until capitalism created slavery, which made black people private property and white people the oppressive owners. And that's what created systemic racism, which is why whiteness means capitalism, because capitalism created systemic racism.
It said, but I recently came across the word dúchas, an ancient Scottish Gaelic ecological principle of interconnectedness between people, the land, and non-human beings. Dúchas speaks to the type of coexistence and entanglement that we are now perhaps too late recognizing the utter necessity of if we are going to survive. These entanglements would be bowled over by modernity or by whiteness, the imposition of whiteness. So yeah, like what kind of principles, what kind of ecological principles and understanding of the relationship to nature and the environment did people who came to be racialized as white have before
came
they came
to be racialized as white?
I mean, I love history, so for me, going back into the past is always very exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And I do really think that this connection this disconnection actually from the earth is obviously inherently related to capitalism and how much the value that's put on certain things, and all of these oppressive issues are extractive
What was that? What was that? It's inherently related to capitalism. What was that?
Of history. So for me, going back into the past is always very exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And I do really think that this connection, this disconnection actually from the earth is obviously inherently related to capitalism and how much the value that's put on certain things, and all of these oppressive issues are extractive issues, and capitalism inherently is about extraction, and extraction is how we've ended up with the climate crisis, because extractivism and the impact it has on indigenous communities, but also on the natural land, and how it's also extracting our futures away from us at the same time, and and extracting many people's present days away from them now, and just like where value is put on. I think that's something that we all must reflect on in climate, and it's not just anyone who's watching who might not be.
That will mean washed in capitalism, bro. Washed in capitalism.
Involved in climate stuff. It's not just for science people. Like, it's not a science thing, it's a justice thing as well. It's a human thing. It's one thing that can unite us in some way behind a cause, and I think it's definitely an issue where how you talk about coalition building, that's so deeply essential, because all oppressed groups and all people need to come together and realize that this shit, as you say, this shit is killing all of us. And when it comes to the climate crisis, it's never truer than then, that this shit is literally killing all of us. And we all must unite behind that and realize that we all have skin in the game. Like, it's not just.
No, it's not that they're more direct than they used to be. It's that you understand more of what they're saying than you used to understand. The more you understand how to speak socialist, the more direct these people come across. But it's not that they weren't always this direct. They were always this direct. The problem is that people didn't listen. And we're going to stop the debate about what whitewashing is right now in the chat. I'm not fucking around. The more you listen to these people, the more you are going to understand what they say. That's what's happening.
Just that some groups of people who are like an amount of oppressed, I don't know, hierarchy of oppressed, that people will make out. It's not like those people are the only ones who should be doing for it. It shouldn't be. It's because for all of us and for the collective together.
I think
capitalism means private property ownership. Capitalism has always existed because private property has always existed. These people believe that capitalism means private property ownership.
I think we should go to questions. I've just seen that, but before we do, I'm going to say one thing really quickly. Actually, in the conversations that I've been having, most of my research, has been on race, and in more recent years on capitalism as well. But I've really I've asked to be in conversation with people that are far more knowledgeable about the climate, or knowledgeable, about kind of trade unions and that kind of organizing, because I really do want to use this as a springboard, even for myself, to be in conversation in coalition with people, people that have that other type of, a particular type of expertise that I want to learn more about, so I can also be more involved in those movements and looking at kind of, relating them all or integrating them all together.
Yeah, definitely. So the first question is quite a long one, so I'll just read it. I'm often overwhelmed by the magnitude of the capitalist and patriarchal society that we live in. I love Audre Lorde's quote, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house."
Listen to the start of the first question. I'm overwhelmed with the capitalistic and patriarchal society that we live in. This is a conversation about what white people can do next. That is the name of the book, What White People Can Do Next. And the very first question they get asked is, I am overwhelmed with the patriarchal and capitalistic nature of our society. For anyone that thinks that normal people don't understand what they're talking about, if normal people didn't understand what they were talking about, then the very first question would not have been, I'm overwhelmed with the capitalistic and patriarchal society. They understand what they're talking about. It's the people who were not indoctrinated into this stuff in school that don't know what they're talking about. Let's rewind. Hang on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So the first question is quite a long one, so I'll just read it. I'm often overwhelmed by the magnitude of the capitalist and patriarchal society that we live in. I love Audre Lorde's quote, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." I believe this fits into your abolitionist analysis. Where I struggle is in marrying this with the climate change emergency, given the time sensitivity of it. How can we dismantle institutions whilst simultaneously having no alternative framework/system that is necessary to enact impactful change?
Well, the alternative system is socialism. Stephen B., thank you for the super chat. So if whiteness is a synonym for capitalism, why don't they just say the word... Stephen, how many times have they said the word capitalism in this presentation? I'm sorry, Stephen, this is one of the stupidest fucking questions that conservatives ask. I see them ask this all the time. If they mean capitalism, then why don't they just say capitalism? How many times have they literally said capitalism in this presentation? Every single time they say whiteness, they also say capitalism. You guys like to pretend like I'm just making this up, like these people never say the word capitalism, because if what they really meant with the term with the term whiteness was capitalism, they would just come out and say the term capitalism, except that, and I appreciate the $5, I really do, they have said capitalism no less than probably 4 dozen times in this presentation. Explicitly. If we add in the extra times where they're talking about the collective liberation, the economic system, the system, if we add in the extra times where they're alluding to capitalism by saying some sort of system level analysis or anti-racism or any of that, we probably have them saying it over 100 times in this one presentation. So again, thank you for the money. I appreciate it, but if you haven't heard the term capitalism in this presentation, I don't know what you're listening to. I have literally paused the video every single time they say capitalism and say, did you hear them say capitalism? One of the projects I'm working on right now is going through the 6-hour women's socialism conference and clipping every single time they use the term capitalism. And spoiler alert, they say capitalism like 4 or 5 times more than they say white people or whiteness or any of these things. So I don't know what to tell you, bro. If you aren't hearing the term capitalism, you are not listening. No, they are literally saying capitalism. It really is like conservatives don't want to hear the term capitalism. Is there something in the conservative brain that prevents them from listening to what is being said? Because I truly and sincerely have no other explanation for this. How is it possible that we listen to a term where like, or a presentation where like every 5th word they're saying capitalism, and conservatives are still like, I'm confused. Why aren't they saying the term capitalism? It's like, is there something that prevents you guys from hearing what they're saying? Because they're literally saying it over and over and over and over and over again. I truly have no other way to grapple with this. Milo, every fucking time they have talked about whiteness, they have explicitly said capitalism. This is not theoretical. This is not a fucking allegory. Do we need to start the presentation over and listen to it again? See, this is why, guys. This is why When I say I want you listening to the fucking presentation instead of arguing with me or instead of debunking what these people say, there is a reason that I want you listening to the presentation. And now that reason has become abundantly fucking clear. Because you aren't listening to the presentation if you aren't hearing them say the term capitalism. They don't hide it. It's not theoretical. It's not a shot in the dark. They'll say it probably at least 24 more times before the presentation is over. And Steven still isn't listening. Okay, maybe we just need to go back and watch the whole presentation again. Steven, thank you for the $5. They have literally said the term capitalism no less than 4 dozen times in this presentation. What I'm honestly asking, what is not computing? How is it possible that they could literally be using the term capitalism explicitly in no uncertain terms? And you're not hearing it. How this is not coded language, Jane. This is not coded language. They are God fucking damn it. They are saying the fucking word capitalism. How is it possible? There is no, guys, I am not saying they're using synonyms for the word. Oh my fucking God. I am not saying they are using synonyms for the word capitalism. I am saying they are explicitly, Jane, they're not using fucking coded language. They have explicitly said the term capitalism no less than 4 dozen times in this presentation. How is it the only explanation is that people are not listening to what is being said. So I have to ask again, guys, why am I fucking wasting my time? This stream has been going for 2.5 hours. On a Saturday night, I could be hanging out with my husband right now. I could be watching a movie. I could be relaxing. Why in the ever-loving fuck am I wasting my time doing this when we are literally watching a presentation where they have said the term capitalism explicitly, not coded language, not any sort of fucking synonym, the term capitalism explicitly no less than 4 dozen times in the last 54 minutes of the presentation, and people for some reason are not fucking hearing it. If you are not listening to the presentation, that is a you problem. That is not a fucking me problem. And if people are going to come here and they're not going to fucking listen, I have explicitly paused the presentation and gone back and rewound every single time they have said the term fucking capitalism. Why am I wasting my time doing this if you are not going to listen?
Is that to you? What's my abolition? What is that to you?
I don't
think it's more about the environment.
I think it's more about capitalism and like about changing capitalism and dismantling capitalism, and then how we can link that to the climate emergency. But
what?
I can move on to the next one, capitalism.
What was that? What was that? It's like about changing capitalism and dismantling capitalism. God, wow. What are they talking about, guys? I'm just so confused. They're using a very confusing coded language. They are using a very confusing coded fucking language that is just impossible to understand. It is impossible to understand. When they say it's like about changing capitalism and dismantling capitalism, what do they mean? It's almost like when I tell you guys they're talking about fucking capitalism, and then they say it's like about changing capitalism and dismantling capitalism, what they mean is they want to get rid of fucking capitalism. Explicitly, using the same term twice within the same fucking breath. Did everyone hear the fucking term? Does everyone see this? We're like, this is not fucking theoretical. This is not a fucking coded language. This is not a synonym. This is not hidden behind everything. Does everyone see what is on the fucking screen right fucking now? Is anyone fucking confused? Well, Carlin, if they meant the term capitalism, why don't they just say the term capitalism? They do, repeatedly, in every single presentation we fucking watch. Does anyone need help? Do we understand? Thank you, Benjamin. I appreciate it. It's right there. It always has been. In the 3 years I've been doing this, it's always been there. And yet every single day I hear from conservatives, well, Carlin, how is it possible that if they mean capitalism, they're not saying the term capitalism? Let's listen again, shall we?
Framework/system that is necessary to enact impactful change.
Is that to you? What's my abolition? What is that to you?
I don't
think it's more about the environment.
I think it's more about capitalism and like about changing capitalism and dismantling capitalism, and then how we can link that to the climate emergency. But I can move on to the next one instead.
Let me try and give a quick. Quick. It's not a quick answer question, but let me try and give some sort of response. So what white people can do next, i.e., what we all can do next, is I really want the book to help people make connections between things that they haven't maybe seen or thought about before. And I don't even really see a kind of widespread interrogation of capitalism going on. And in fact, in lots of the anti-racist movement, I see a reproduction of its norms rather than a challenge of it. So I want people to have
wow. It's almost like she's saying that she wants the anti-racism movement to challenge capitalism. Isn't that what she just said? Should we go back and listen again to the 5 or 6 times within one single sentence they've said the term capitalism? Let's do that. And how she really wants the anti-racist movement to be more about challenging capitalism. We'll go back and listen to the whole thing again. We'll even start at the beginning of the question. We will start at the beginning of the question, which the question starts off saying, I'm overwhelmed by the patriarchal and capitalist system. And patriarchy was created by capitalism, as a reminder. Let's listen to the whole thing again. I will play this as many times as I fucking need to. Yeah, a lot of people owe me $2 super chats. Indeed. Let's now listen to them say capitalism 7 or 8 times within the same sentence.
Them all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So the first question is quite a long one, so I'll just read it. I'm often overwhelmed by the magnitude of the capitalist and patriarchal society that we live in. I love Audre Lorde's quote, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." I believe this fits into your abolitionist analysis. Where I struggle is in marrying this with the climate change emergency, given the time sensitivity of it. How can we dismantle institutions whilst simultaneously having no alternative framework / system that is necessary to enact impactful change?
Is that to you? What's my abolition? What is that to you?
I
think it's more about the environment.
I think it's more about capitalism and like about changing capitalism and dismantling capitalism, and then how we can link that to the climate emergency. But I can move on to the next one instead.
Let me try and give a quick. Quick. It's not a quick answer question, but let me try and give some sort of response. So what white people can do next, i.e., what we all can do next, is I really want the book to help people make connections between things that they haven't maybe seen or thought about before. And I don't even really see a kind of widespread interrogation of capitalism going on. And in fact, in lots of the anti-racist movement, I see a reproduction of its norms rather than a challenge of it. So I want people to have a basic understanding of what it is, what capitalism is, and its relationship to racism and to systems of exploitation that affect us all. In terms of the pressing urgency of
why on earth, if it wasn't about capitalism and this was some big fucking mystery, why on earth would she say that people need to have a better understanding of capitalism in regards to the racist systems that capitalism perpetuates? Did everyone hear it? Let's back and listen to that last part again. That part was really good.
A kind of widespread interrogation of capitalism going on. And in fact, in lots of the anti-racist movement, I see a reproduction of its norms rather than a challenge of it. So I want people to have a basic understanding of what it is, what capitalism is, and its relationship to racism and to systems of exploitation that affect us all. In terms of the pressing urgency of acting on the climate, because you will know this better than me, but I remember reading, and it's probably 2 years ago now, a report that was saying the estimation was there was maybe 12 years to create the necessary change to kind of prevent pretty major disaster, and that would need a coordinated international effort to start immediately. And that was 2 years ago, and I haven't seen any evidence of that coordinated international effort. So to me, the most powerful thing, would be a pretty kind of rapid building of a mass movement, that look at the farmers in India. That's not something I know a great deal about, but that's a huge body of people, the recent protests there. If there could be, there's so much thirst for change, there are so many kind of movements and
that's some fancy word salad that solves none of the issues they claim to care about. Why is Tate wrong? Why is Tate wrong when Tate says that's some fancy word salad that solves none of the issues they claim to care about? Pop quiz for the chat. Why is that completely and totally, utterly incorrect for anyone that understands how to speak socialist? The issue they care about is capitalism. The problem is capitalism. The solution is socialism. They don't care about the other issues. The other issues are an avenue to attack capitalism. Do these people believe that climate change would exist if they were able to abolish capitalism? No, you do need to know how to speak socialist because you don't understand the implication. You don't understand why. These are all tools to destroy capitalism. They believe that capitalism is causing climate change in the first place. They believe that all the problems in the world go away once we abolish capitalism. They care about attacking capitalism. They think that climate change is caused by capitalism. Yes, they believe that climate change exists and they believe it was caused by capitalism. And if we abolish capitalism, that would solve climate change and every other problem in the world. This is why we need to know how to speak socialist. Because if you do not understand why they believe the things they do, you will not understand them. No problems would exist if we abolish capitalism. Abolishing capitalism is what they care about. It is all that they care about. It is perpetually what they care about. That is all their revolution is about. It is not about anything else. It is only and exclusively about abolishing capitalism, which they define as private property ownership. Is anyone confused? It's not questions that cause trouble. It's people not listening that cause trouble. People are allowed to ask questions. But when I answer the question explicitly 19 ways from Sunday and show you evidence of the answer and you don't listen, that is the fucking problem. You're welcome, Tate. I appreciate you listening and taking in the information. And this is why we pay attention instead of spending time debunking them. The underlying belief is that everything, every single thing is socially determined and thus any problem can be solved through collective action. Capitalism is individualism. Abolishing activism brings in collectivism. Well, if they're insane, then you're losing to insane people. So what does that say about you? You must really suck to be losing to so many insane people. Maybe you want to take a long look in the mirror and ask yourselves why your strategies are so bad and so ineffective that you are losing the entire fucking country to verifiably insane people.
Protests, if that kind of built rapidly into like a big global mass movement that is actually like a labor movement, you know, that's rather than just symbolic demonstrations, but is actually like really putting the pressure on capitalism, you know, then we would have more influence and more power in having our demands met. First of all, we have to articulate what our demands are, even, you know, but yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of just to touch on that as well, what it's saying about how can we dismantle institutions whilst also having to address the climate emergency. I think in order to like adequately address the climate emergency, we have to dismantle these institutions, and these things can't be separated from each other. And what you're saying,
in order to address the climate emergency, we have to dismantle the institutions. What institution is she talking about? What institution have they said at least a dozen times within the last 5 minutes of this presentation. In order to dismantle the climate emergency, we have to dismantle the institutions. She's talking about capitalism. Capitalism, 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 capitalism.
About movements, if we look through history, movements are what have created change. Like, change isn't a passive thing. It's something that happens by being forced through disruption, and especially under capitalism, disruption is around like causing economic disruption is a way that you can do that, or causing kind of disruption to so many different things. And
Say
everyone
capitalism
who's
again.
also listening, just join a movement in your local area and get involved and become part of that.
This is the thing. I hear, people saying, oh, I just want to be an ally. They don't even have Black people in their immediate environment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, please don't go out of your way to seek out a Black person to be their ally. Get involved in your local community and like do some organizing there.
Yeah, and get stuck in, because it's in community where we can create the most change. And also there will be issues that are very local to you and local to your community that you can be involved with. And you don't have to seek out an issue somewhere else. Like, you can work at home first as well. So the next question is, this kind of moves on, but it kind of touched on it already, but what kind of collective real world action would you like to see happening? So talked about movements. I guess that kind of the same kind of thing, just joining movements, being part of movements.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. If the main focus for liberation should be on structural change, how do we fight and dismantle a structure that is primarily dominated by and centers whiteness? I'm thinking specifically
Capitalism.
Parliament and the House of Lords, the criminal justice system, courts and prison, and the overarching capitalist system that we find ourselves in.
She just said it again. The Parliament, the House of Lords, the criminal justice system. Socialists believe that all of these systems, the capitalist, in this case, the United Kingdom, they're talking about the capitalist government in the United Kingdom. The prison industrial complex is also grounded in capitalism, but they feel the same in the United States. They believe the United States government is also grounded in capitalism. That's why they want to abolish the Supreme Court. They want to abolish the Senate. They want to abolish the Electoral College, because all of those are capitalist systems. And she literally just said capitalism at the very end. And yeah, the royal family, oh yeah, you better believe that if these people take over in the UK, there ain't going to be, the royal family's probably going to be executed in Trafalgar Square. Which would really suck, because I would like Kate to be queen someday. That would make me very happy. Let's listen again.
If the main focus for liberation should be on structural change, how do we fight and dismantle a structure that is primarily dominated by and centers whiteness? I'm thinking specifically Parliament and the House of Lords, the criminal justice system, courts and prison, and the overarching capitalist system that we find ourselves in.
I mean, we could start by voting for governments that are committed to
Socialist.
Combating inequality, rather than voting for governments that are committed to enforcing the status quo and exacerbating racist tensions.
Capitalism.
That would be a powerful starting point.
Mm-hmm.
We don't seem to have managed that. And when that hasn't occurred, like look at all the kill the bill organizing that's happened.
I mean, come on, how fat can we just royal break? Can we just take? Can I get one ray of sunshine in this presentation? How fabulous is it going to be when Kate and William are king and queen? I mean, come on. And I'm appreciating Charles and Camilla. Okay, I don't have anything against Charles. Charles is fine. Charles is a transitionary monarch. But the day that William is crowned and it's William and Kate it's going to be spectacular. Come on. It's going to be so fun.
And groups like Sisters and Cut, and how effective they've been in the last few weeks,
Yeah. I think also within that, it's also not limiting the things that we're asking for as well. And this kind of links to what you were saying before about whiteness, but one thing that Joe, the co-host of the podcast that I present, always says to me is to stop limiting my ideals of the future on the systems that already exist now, and instead look beyond that. And so kind of within that, we can't just settle for how things are now, and we should always be looking beyond that. Someone has asked a question about, so hi, question to both. Michaela mentioned that that books are really useful for learning beyond social media, but what would you recommend?
If I ever come back to England again, someone has to take me for tea. I didn't get to go to tea last time. I would like to go to tea and have scones and sandwiches. I feel like I've earned it.
For people who struggle to read academic texts but still want to learn, I've had friends who say that although social media is limited, it's a much more accessible form of learning for them. Do you have any recommendations for accessible?
So I made this like super accessible for that purpose, and most people have read it in a day, everywhere from an hour to like maybe the whole day, depending on
Thank you, Terry. Quite a gentleman.
So that was
I
very
appreciate it.
My intention. There are people that will so my aim is to translate some of the theory and more obscure but very powerful ideas that are not commonly known on social media, and like bring that to wider audiences. And again, organizing in your community. Like if you look at the feminist movements of the earlier periods, like 60s, 70s, 80s, they had consciousness raising groups as central to their mission. So they understood that not everybody was going to read the theory. So the consciousness raising groups were conversations with those who had read the theory and those who hadn't, and going through it all in person. People that had read it and understood it, explaining and sharing that knowledge with those that were unable for whatever reasons to do that reading. Knowledge should be shared. This weird kind of idea as what this kind of also, we live in this time. It's like Michael Gove. I think it was Michael Gove that was saying nobody wants to hear from experts, and you see that as well in the anti-racist movement. It's sometimes as though if somebody has studied theory, they're almost held in suspicion, in some quarters. If you look at the Black Panthers, who I reference a lot in the book, before you could join the Black Panthers, you did a 6-week immersive study course in. So you had the foundations of a political education before you even started meeting with the Black Panthers. And these are not this was with people that didn't have academic privilege or advantage. These are like working class Black people in the hood, So the idea that the only people that can read or engage with theory are people that have some form of economic privilege is one I reject.
Yeah, and
economic
I would say
privilege
that
means capitalism.
Also, sometimes I think people also sometimes make out that a lot of books aren't accessible when there are a lot of really accessibly written books that are, especially I think of books that are like interviews and conversations, like Freedom is a Constant Struggle, which is like a collection of interviews and conversations with Angela Davis. That is because it's conversations transcribed, it is like hearing someone talk, so it is really accessible in that way. And also there's a wealth of speeches that are out there that talk through theory and that you can engage with, and I think that that's something that is also really wonderful to do, because I recognize that not everyone might be able to read books, but if you're like an auditory learner instead, then that's a way that you can engage, and audiobooks is another way. I'd really recommend speeches. There's also, even on Spotify, they have like playlists of different speeches on prison abolition and things like that, which I find really interesting, because it's an accessible way for people to jump in and get started and then maybe find something else.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing someone say,
isn't it nice that they have socialist study guides available for free on Spotify? Isn't that nice, everyone? How nice of them.
Say podcasts, and I was a late adopter of podcasts, but I'm a huge fan of podcasts, and podcasts often, again, it's like what podcast you're listening to, but podcasts, I've seen like very robust and in-depth kind of conversations happening there, far less reductive than what I might see on social media.
Yeah, for sure, because that's why like we started our podcast, was because we realized on social media a lot of the conversations weren't able to be as expansive as we'd want them to be, and we wanted to have a space where we could define key terms and make it accessible and also have deeper conversations. So yeah, I love podcasts. like obviously have some of the motivation to love it because I'm so have one, but they are really great, and there are so many out there. But again, in the same way, like everyone needs to critically think about who is the host and where is that information coming from, and is there
absolutely. So I really enjoy Cornel West's current podcast, the Tightrope, which it's Cornel West and Trisha Rose, Professor Trisha Rose, I think her name is, and it's on at the moment, so it's very responsive to everything that's happening currently. But it's hosted by Cornel West, who's like a radical, like Black liberation, radical
running for president,
Black radical tradition scholar. So those conversations are happening with somebody that has a really like rigorous and robust and deeply kind of rooted intellectual and grassroots organizing background.
Cool. I haven't actually listened to that one, so I'm gonna have to check that out after this. That sounds really great. The next question is what work in Ireland and the UK are you excited by? Just mix it up a bit.
Okay, let me focus on Ireland. Like, I mean, Ireland has gone through like so much change in the last few years. It's gone from like when I was growing up, still being incredibly socially conservative country, where there was this very repressive, illegally repressive, not just like in terms of attitudes, but actually legally within the legislation, very repressive, to being one, where in the past few years there's been, like, it's the first country that had, the gay marriage by like popular referendum, I think. Then the God, my brain is just like, oh, what am I saying? The abortion becoming like legalized like two years ago. Oh my God, somebody said when Don't Touch My Hair came out, and they said the right year, and I corrected them and said a different year, because I've just lost, like, I'm just like, what year is it? What's going on? But also, like just Ireland having, like grassroots organizing that has brought about in the past few years real substantive change, and has resulted in a country that's actually, in many ways like far more progressive feeling than here at present, which is a complete reversal of how it was when I first left Ireland and moved here. Here, I'm seeing actually a younger generation I'm seeing like a younger generation who's maybe younger than a lot of it's almost like there's a generation of people that are more like neoliberal and representational politics focused, and then there's like a younger generation to them that I'm kind of seeing all these young black Marxists like coming up on Twitter who are like very just very astute, really, really like know the theory, know what they're talking about, and are just like are just challenging like a lot of the stuff that one sees. And I find the proliferation of those voices interesting, like a radical black movement. And also that I don't even know that they're not all, lots of them are black, but they are definitely people that work with other radicals irrespective of race. Because
that kind of links back to what you were saying about where to learn, because I know that I've learned the most when in community spaces through this almost like tradition of activism, of sharing knowledge within those spaces and interpersonally. And I think that's really, and it's really great to see that there are other people who are doing that. I have another question. As we come out of COVID or the pandemic and are able to engage people in these conversations outside of social media, what are some of the more meaningful ways that we can have these conversations in a more nuanced way?
Sorry, my baby just
That's all right. No worries.
just entered the room, so I
Into the
missed. Hey, I missed the question.
That's
As the
fine.
world as we
So
come out of
as we
COVID,
come out of the pandemic, so COVID pandemic, and are able to engage people in these conversations outside of social media, what are some of the more meaningful ways that we can have these conversations in a more nuanced way?
I guess it like depends on the space.
Yeah.
You know, I guess like find out like what's kind of going on like locally to you, and like get involved with some of those groups. It really depends, like I guess what the issue is, what the space is. But I think people like being in the physical space with each other is a powerful antidote, you know, to a lot of the excesses of the overemphasis of the digital sphere. I mean, we've kind of been, that's been kind of unavoidable because we just had that minor issue of the global pandemic to contend with for the past over a year. But yeah, I feel quite excited, I guess, about the energy that people are going to be bringing to, you know, kind of local organizing. Like I look forward to getting involved with more stuff.
Yeah, cool. We love that. Yes. Everyone just needs to organize, get involved in the community.
And also, I guess not everybody, I guess sometimes there's an issue, there's this idea that people have to like set something up themselves. You can also like, loads of people are doing loads of work. I mean, of course you can set up something yourself if that need is there, but there might already be that thing being done and being done well. So join with people.
Exactly. And it's so much more efficient if there are already people doing this great work to just enhance and support that work than to do all the work to create a whole new movement, which is a lot. And I also kind of want to touch on that question, because there are conversations going on off social media, even though we are apart physically. Loads of people are organizing via Zoom and online, and people can still join meetings. Like organizing hasn't stopped because of the pandemic. It's just taken a different kind of way of doing things. So anyone who's, you can still be involved in organizing. We don't have to wait until the pandemic's over. It's happening now. You can join a group and come to a like 200 person strong Zoom call and have a lot of technical difficulties, but it's nice and fun. So I might be cheeky and actually ask the question myself, because I'm interested in, because I recognize that the nature of publishing is that you write a book and then it's been written a few months way like before you end up, it goes out into the world and things have changed and there are lots of different things that have happened. Is there anything that you, like if you were writing it right now, that you would add in that you didn't add in when you wrote it initially?
I was actually writing it like right up to No. It was written. It was written, but I was like doing the copy edit until like a month or so before it came out. But it existed since like late last year. What would I change? Yeah, I'd probably write something. I'd probably talk about the report in some way, reference that. Although I also don't want to like kind of immortalize that. I think it should be like, it's
ignored. Yeah. or goodbye. I heard you on Nick Ferrari, and you were great at holding your ground. Actually, at one of our we do telling your story trainings for activists, and we use that as an example of doing a good interview and not letting someone like all over you. So thank you for that, because that was really helpful.
I'm so happy. I could just hear him. He was like, he kept like gulping to try and like interrupt.
That was so great. And you just were like, actually, I know what I'm saying, and I'm gonna like keep my cool, and I'm gonna be great. And it was amazing. We loved it.
But actually, in terms, to go back to your other question, you know, I probably wouldn't. So yeah, the report, but like I actually also try to keep things like not too reactive to every little thing that is unfolding. Because
I'm bored with this, so I'm going to fast forward.
We're
not saying anything interesting.
How you achieve things is
yeah. And then there were things, absolutely, I am really glad you made that comparison. And then there were things like that I'd written about before, and then, you know, kind of like I was saying that it's in everybody.
You don't convert a missionary. You don't. There is no hope of converting these people. There is no hope of waking these people up. These people are in a cult. The only thing that we can do is learn who they are and learn what they believe. And that only comes by listening to them, not trying to debunk them, not trying to get them to change their minds. You will never convert these people. It will never happen. It is a waste of energy. The best you can do is learn to understand them. And until you learn to understand them, don't do anything else. Don't do anything else.
Everybody's best interests, not just Black people, but everybody's best interest to not have police forces that just like kind of behave with impunity.
Yeah.
And then I'd already written that. And then we saw the protests around Sarah Everard, and we saw these images of like white women being really brutalized, which isn't something that we're like really used to seeing. So I'd already kind of written about that, and then like that example happened. So yeah, I think it's about more writing about dynamics than individual.
Yeah,
instances.
I really appreciated that, because when we've been talking about police, and especially after the issue of Sarah Everard, we also need to remember that
if they know nothing about life and reality, then why are they winning? Guys, every I swear to God, guys, every single time you say something like this, they're stupid, they're dumb, they're mentally ill, they don't understand life, they're not hinged. Okay, every single time one of you says something like this, I'm going to stop the presentation and I'm going to go. If they are so stupid and they are so dumb and they are so mentally ill and they don't understand life and they don't understand reality, then why are they winning? Why are they defeating you so resoundingly? If you're the smart ones, if you're the ones that are hinged into reality, if you are the sane ones, if you're the ones that understand life and they do not, then why are they winning so badly?
the police have also been a force of violence against white working class people as well. And the Met itself was founded to control working class people in London. And it's not just a simple thing of this or that. It's way more complex than that. So this question kind of links the question that we talked about before about governments and systems, but it basically asks, do you feel positive that we can work to affect change when our political leaders and systems of power are so invested in and often controlled by capitalist business systems, which are intrinsically patriarchal, racist, and ableist?
All those things mean the same thing. They all mean capitalism.
Yeah, well, I guess that's why, you have...
Hang on, let's listen to that again, because apparently this is a point that I have not hammered home enough. Every time they talk about systems, they are talking about capitalism. Every time they talk about the government, they're talking about the capitalist government. Elisa over on Rumble, if they're children, then why are they losing? Then why are you losing to children? I don't know why I need to repeat myself 8,000 times in the same stream. Every time they talk about systems, they're talking about capitalism. Every single time they're talking about government, they're talking about the capitalist government. Every single time they're talking about race, they're talking about capitalism, the system of systemic racism that was created by capitalism. When capitalism created slavery, slavery created systemic racism. Therefore, they're talking about capitalism because systemic racism is grounded in capitalism and can only be defeated when capitalism is abolished. Every single time they are talking about the patriarchy, they are talking about the capitalism, because capitalism created the gender binary, which created the patriarchy. Why are they winning? Because they're smarter than everyone. They're smarter than everyone. They are better chess players than everyone, and everyone continues to dismiss them as mentally ill and stupid. When you dismiss your enemy, then they will be given the tools to defeat you. So let's listen again.
Question kind of links the question that we talked about before about governments and systems, but it basically asks, do you feel positive that we can work to affect change when our political leaders and systems of power are so invested in and often controlled by capitalist business systems, which are intrinsically patriarchal, racist, and ableist?
All those things mean capitalism.
Yeah, well, I guess that's why, you have organizers around Black liberation trying to create like parallel institutions, because they feel that they feel that they don't want to be included in institutions that they feel are like ethically and morally bankrupt.
Oh, so she's saying that Black liberation organizers are creating parallel institutions so they don't have to participate in capitalism.
So yeah, I don't know.
And yeah, that's very that's like quite a big question to ask. I think sometimes you just kind of have to act anyway and not be too demoralized. I know this, maybe this is me having some sort of maybe too much naivety or something, but I think there's a point at which we kind of also just need to act as much as we can and not let the systems grind us down too much.
Yeah, I also feel, you know, it's not just about everything that's happening externally. It's also about like internally. And there's something. Please go on with what you're saying while I look.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask someone else was asking a question. But would you like me to wait or ask this one?
I think I can find this very quickly. Sorry.
Okay.
I need to just have the PDF. It's because I never know, like, I'm just being responsive, so I never know what I'm gonna
Rottweiler in with the super chat. Thank you, Rottweiler. If you want to do something, pull your kids out of public schools, homeschool, or get them into homeschool co-ops. You can't convert true believers, maybe useful idiots. It's still unproductive. That's exactly right. And guys, you can't save everyone else's kids. You cannot save everyone else's kids. You have to save your own kids, and that's going to have to be good enough. But if you spend your time trying to save everyone else's kids, your kids are going to get sucked into this because you aren't paying attention to what's going on with them. We can only put our energy in so many places at once. Anyone who tells you that you can save your kids and also everyone else's kids at the same time is lying to you. You have to focus on your own kids and your own family. And if you aren't doing that, then don't be surprised when your kids get pulled into this and don't do anything but blame yourself because you should have been focusing on your own kids.
I actually really want to share this bit because it's I think it's useful in answer to that thing we were just asked. Sorry, just bear with me one moment.
Also, everyone, I'm sorry if you can hear whistling wind. Edinburgh is very windy, and
oh my god, whistling wind sounds so like evocative.
The whole time it's been so blowy outside, and I'm not sure if you can hear it, but I can hear it.
Yes, this is exactly right. This is exactly right. So much of the "we are winning" from clueless conservatives come from not having any idea about the differences between political power and institutional power. Conservatives believe that they will defeat socialists by winning elections. That is retarded. That is never going to happen. You will never defeat these people by winning political elections because while conservatives are focused entirely on winning political elections, these people for the last 70 plus years have been focused almost entirely on taking over institutions and getting themselves into positions of power that they cannot be fired from, and they will not lose if they lose an election. So what? Let's say next year by some miracle, because this is never going to happen, but let's exist in the land of fantasy for a second. Let's say in 2024, conservatives managed to win the House, the Senate, and the White House. These people would still be winning. They would still be winning. Because it doesn't matter how many political arms of the government conservatives control. First of all, conservatives will shoot themselves in the foot eventually. We all know that. But secondly, Just because conservatives win an election doesn't mean they have wrestled back anything in terms of the institutional power that these people control. Winning an election does not give you the K through 12 schools. Winning elections will not decorrupt the teaching pool of the teachers that teach in every single public school in the country. Winning an election will not give you back the colleges and the universities. Winning an and I don't give a fuck if people are defunding diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, because contrary to what Chris Rufo is trying to convince everyone of, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are a manifestation of the ideology. They are not the root cause. They're not the root cause. They're just one manifestation. And for every single diversity department that's defunded, which I don't necessarily think it's a total waste of time. I think it's good that diversity departments are getting defunded. But can we just acknowledge that for every single diversity department that's being defunded, some other thing is popping up? And guess what? These people are wise to the fact that conservatives are now trying to defund diversity and equity departments everywhere. So do you know what they're doing? They're changing the name of the fucking departments. They're just calling it something different, doing exactly the same thing, just calling it something different. If you do not understand the difference between political power and institutional power, then you will never defeat these people, because political power is short-term and it is fleeting and it can be taken away from you with every single election, whereas institutional power is long-term and is very difficult to wrestle away once it's been won over. These people are the root cause. These people were pushing diversity, equity, and inclusion into organizations before those departments ever even existed. They just didn't explicitly call it that.
Quite loudly.
I wish I could hear it. Okay, hang on. Here we go. Almost there. Okay, yeah, here. So, yeah. In the undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study, Fred Moten and his co-author Stefano Harney articulate the right to refuse what has been refused to you. They call this refusal the first right, and it is a game-changing kind of refusal in that it signals the refusal of the choices on offer. Sometimes I don't get into like online debates because I actually like refuse the framework. You know, I'm like, I actually reject the framework that's being used. Mm-hmm. So it's not that like, yeah, so this is this refusal. It signals the refusal of the choices offered. It is in this refusal that we can reshape desire, reorient hope, reimagine possibility, and do so separate from the fantasies nestled into rights and respectability. To paraphrase the philosopher and post-activist Bayo Akomolafe, fugitivity is the radical counterpart to inclusivity within the dominant framework of oppression. You know? So sometimes I don't like the system, but I also don't like the way the challenges to the system are being presented, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this kind of, I guess, kind of links to the next question, which is more about academia and university. So what would you like to see in academia and university settings for them to move towards a decolonized university experience and research?
Oh my God, in that report, it talks about decolonization as being banning white authors and having...
She's about to talk about how stupid the ideas that conservatives have about what decolonization are, which I think is kind of funny. What does decolonization mean? Pop quiz for the chat. What does decolonization mean? It doesn't mean violent revolution. I don't care how many times Chris Rufo says it. Decolonization does not mean violent revolution. What does decolonization mean? It was always full-blown Marxist. It was always full-blown Marxist. This is the origin point. Marxism and socialism is the origin point for all of it. Every DEI seminar you've ever been in has been full-blown Marxist. Some just hide it better than others. Decolonization means the redistribution of private property. It means getting rid of capitalism, the elimination of capitalism, removing capitalism, decapitalism, reclaiming private property taken by the capitalists. It means overthrowing capitalism, removing capitalism and private property, getting rid of capitalism, anti-capitalism, taking back private land and making it accessible to like the collective. Decolonization means getting rid of capitalism and private property, removal of private property. Exactly. Removing private property from the capitalist. Let's listen again.
University experience and research.
Oh my God, in that report, it talks about decolonization as being banning white authors and having a tokenistic kind of reference to Black excellence. And I'm like, that's not what decolonization is.
No.
Ding! Ding!
Okay, so I
ding,
did
ding, ding. For every single conservative that says decolonization is about killing white people. You just heard from the woman who literally wrote the book, What White People Can Do Next, which isn't actually about white people at all, as it turns out, and that's quoting her. That's not quoting me. She said that. Decolonization has nothing to do with white people at all. Listen again.
Within the dominant framework of oppression, you know? So sometimes I don't like the system, but I also don't like the way the challenges to the system are being presented, you know?
Yeah, this kind of, I guess, kind of links to the next question, which is more about academia and university. So what would you like to see in academia and university settings for them to move towards a decolonized university experience and research?
Oh my God, in that report, it talks about decolonization as being banning white authors and having a tokenistic kind of reference to Black excellence. And I'm like, that's not what decolonization is. Okay, so I did my PhD is at Goldsmiths, but my degree and master's are at SOAS, and I was in the Africa department and teaching in the Africa department for a long time. So in my African studies degree, you know, I was actually dealing with African theorists and African indigenous knowledge systems. And not only does that provide alternative and different information, but it also demonstrates different ways of different methodologies for approaching knowledge construction, for approaching different epistemologies. Sorry, I'm going like, I don't know, now I'm going into like academic speak, but so epistemology is knowledge construction. Okay, so there are Eurocentric kind of ways of constructing knowledge, and there are like more African centered. And
hang on, I've got a super chat from Rottweiler. Thank you, Rottweiler. As a quick follow-up, even if Trump wins in 2024, it would buy you some time before they move to outlaw homeschooling, which is why elections are inconsequential in the long run. Homeschool is ASAP. Oh yeah, when the Democrats win in 2024, and I absolutely believe that the Democrats are going to win in 2024, they're going to ban homeschooling. I promise you. They're at least going to try. If by some miracle the Republicans retain any semblance of power at all, they might not be able to get away with it, but they're sure as shit going to try to ban homeschooling. That's going to be like point number 1 on the list. And they're going to try to blame all of this Moms for Liberty bullshit, and that's going to be the cause of them needing to ban homeschooling, because of all these crazy moms that are just that are extremists and that are doing all this crazy shit. Like, you can count on it. In New Hampshire, they're already trying to do it. Now, they're not going to be successful here, but they're trying to.
Indigenous ways of diverse. I don't mean diverse as in diversity and inclusion. I mean diverse as in different to each other, ways of constructing knowledge. And I actually try and introduce that a little bit in the book, you know, where I say in the bit read, read, and dance, I talk about the way, so yeah, there are sources beyond books too. European Enlightenment thinking privileges distance and judgment over other ways of knowing. So we need to think about using senses beyond the problem-solving level. Ron Ware and Les Bach urge us to strive for a democracy of the senses, to think less with our eyes. They describe musical cultures as fertile breeding grounds for anti-racist dissidents. A little bit more. The Black radical tradition can be found in Black expressive culture. So it's not just in books, but it's also found in Black expressive culture, particularly outside of the mainstream, where the most profound expressions of freedom are located in roots reggae and dub and jazz and techno and house and hip hop. Sometimes not in the lyrics, but in the sonics. That's one of the sites where the movement is liberatory, where it is Black as in fugitive. So to go back to decolonization, European Enlightenment thinking, you know, which sets the kind of the Eurocentric canon, the methodologies within that privileges a particular type of objectivity and approaching of knowledge. There are methods that come from, like in Don't Touch My Hair, my previous book, I talk about how people, African people, other people who have oral knowledge systems, you know, where there is, they say there's a proverb from somewhere in East Africa, I think, that's like, when an old man, or maybe it's Mali actually, can't remember which country, but when an old man dies, a library burns down. So these human beings that are these deep repositories of knowledge, you know, that they have studied in like a formal setting, but in an indigenous formal setting. So decolonization is not just changing the information, but also looking at different like methodologies for approaching both knowledge construction and knowledge dissemination. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. We actually, so we only have 5 minutes left, so I'll ask.
Oh, thank God.
Kind of one question
The fresh
to
bell is
close,
almost over.
which I'll summarize a bit. So someone's basically saying that a lot of people who've come along to this event probably have come because they already care about this stuff to some extent. How do we, I'm not sure how I feel. Sometimes I feel a bit weird about echo chambers because I feel like we already existed in echo chambers before social media, and it's people make out as this new creation when actually we would previously would just know the people that we lived around. But how do we expand these conversations and, for example, get people outside of these particular circles to read your book and to engage in these ideas?
So I've already had like a lot of people contact me in the week that the book's been out. They either heard like a podcast where I've been talking about like the themes of the book, and they haven't like read the book yet, but they've heard some of the conversations, and they've said, and then they've gone and read the book, and then they've said that they actually have come away feeling more invested in and empathetic towards issues that they were kind of a bit more resistant to before, and also where they feel, I've had a few people say this, where they feel in the past they've been kind of being called out, and that's made them get defensive. That the way this has approached material has actually made them feel involved and invested, and then they're not getting defensive, and then they can have a different engagement. And it's not about sugarcoating things. The book doesn't sugarcoat things. The book is the book really, you know, talks about the construction of whiteness and like the violence of that. And you know, it's not like kind of trying to placate anyone, but I do think it's a more inclusive vision that is what I'm trying to create is something that is compelling to broader amounts of people than a lot of the current anti-racist conversation, particularly with its kind of fetishization of interpersonal privilege is. I think the current conversation, in fact, alienates. So there's lots of people that are, not lots of people, there's groups of people that are just, you know, committed and extreme racists. And I'm not necessarily talking about them. I'm talking about people that could be otherwise persuaded, but become alienated by the current framework.
Yeah. And I guess I think that there's a lot that as someone who, a lot of my activism is in communication and trying to get people on board and onboarding people. I think I learned a lot from the way that you communicated these issues in this book on how we can better communicate and involve people and move towards like coalition, which is what you talk about a lot, and what we should all want, especially in a world that is facing climate collapse and a world where caring about these issues is so incredibly important, and that we all need to engage with them and all need to be involved, and bring people in many ways. But yeah, and as you said, not in a way that placates people, but in a way that challenges people, in a way that is moving towards unity and coalition in some way.
Yeah. In a way that we can actually see the interrelated nature of different struggles, and that
means intersectionality.
people are investing in not out of some act of charity or benevolence, but because they actually like want their own lives to be better too, and not at the expense of other people. Because your life being better at the expense of other people's or at the expense of like the environment is like super short term and like bullshit. It's actually ultimately going to be destructive for you as well. So it's about getting people to see things in a more, it's not even that hard, like just encouraging a more kind of expansive understanding, I think, of things. And also just like identifying ways in which like different classes of white people also experience forms of like also have their life opportunities diminished, so that they can also see a personal investment in making things better. One of the things that Whiteness did was to kind of like hoodwink people into like the concept of whiteness kind of hoodwinks people from distracting them from all the kind of damaging, extractive kind of like nature of the systems that it also imposes,
It emboldens these systems, I guess, in so many ways, and allows them to continue, because there's this falsehood that it's benefiting people, but actually it's harming all of us. It might just look different in the way the harm is caused. And I think that is a great note to end on. Thank you so much for having me in conversation here, Emma. I'm obsessed with this book. It's so good. I'm obsessed. I've told everyone. I remember I was reading it on one of my shifts at the hospital, and I was saying to all the doctors, like, it's got to read this. Maybe ignore the title a little bit, but you've got to read this, because it's going to call you in, it's going to challenge you, and it's going to make the world a better place. And I think this is what our movements need right now. This is what the world needs right now. And I'm not being...
Yeah, this is definitely what the world needs right now. That's for sure. Okay. Thank God that fresh hell is over. I wasn't saying a lot in the back half of that presentation because I'm just tired of repeating myself, to be honest with you guys. Like, I'm tired of repeating myself. I think that they said it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I don't really have a whole lot to add about it. I feel like if I'm being honest about it, I feel like I was feeling pretty good yesterday. And now today, I feel like I spent more time arguing with my own chat, who refused to listen to what was put right in front of them, than I spent time actually talking about the presentation. And if people want to know why I'm frustrated, if people want to know why I am on the verge of quitting, it's because of that. So, I don't know. Maybe people can just start going and watching these if people are not going to like listen to what's being said, then I don't need to be here. I don't need to be here to suffer through this. Well, Kurt, the entire point of doing this was to have a class. But it doesn't seem as though people want to actually learn. It seems as though people want to come here and get their confirmation bias and not actually learn anything. So if that's all people want, then someone else can do this. I don't need to do this. Either people are serious or they're not. And if they're not serious, then why am I wasting my fucking time? So that's all we have for today. I don't really have anything else to say. I'm pretty black-pilled. Well, no, Kurt. The point is that they disrupt the entire thing. They disrupt the entire thing. They disrupt it for everyone. And so why, again, like I have to come back to like, why am I doing this? This is almost 4 hours on a Saturday night that I can't get back because people don't want to listen and they don't want to learn. And if they don't want to listen and they don't want to learn, then someone else can do this. I don't have to do it anymore because I've been doing it for 3 goddamn years. I've been saying the same thing almost every single day. And seriously, when I have to tackle questions like, why don't they say capitalism if they mean capitalism when they've said capitalism 86 ways from Sunday in a single presentation? Do you know what I get to do now, guys? Do you know what I get to do now? Now I get to go work on a project where, in order to combat the questions from the people who don't listen to the presentations every single time they say capitalism, now I'm working on a project where I'm going back and watching the 6-hour socialism conference, where I'm going to probably go back and watch this one too, and clip out every single instance of them saying capitalism to put it into a single video to send it to people every single time they say to me, Carlin, if they mean capitalism, then why don't they say capitalism? Oh, yeah? Here's all the times that they said capitalism within a single presentation. I really don't know what to say. I really don't know what to say. So, yeah. Anyway, we'll do this big infiltration this week. We'll get that done. And what's going on after that, I truly have no idea. And, well, it doesn't really seem like that many people care to have my help. So people don't want to have my help and they don't want to listen to me. I don't need to do this anymore. All right. That's really all I have to say. I have nothing else. I hope some people learn something. How? You want to build something for me? You send me something. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. I'm going to go. We're going to do movie night tomorrow. I'm probably not going to do a stream between now and Monday. We're doing the big infiltration next week. If you want to come. If you don't want to come, that's fine too. And from where we go from there, who the fuck knows? All right. Take care. We'll see you soon.